Hello and welcome to Stephen University. It's here, it's happening, it's the one that everyone seems, I think, unreasonably excited for. I think you really need to temper those the amount of...
I'm not excited. I've been many things going into podcasts.
Yeah.
I've been excited.
Yeah.
I've been I've been contemplative.
Yeah.
I've been conscious of time. I've never been legitimately scared, and I'm honestly, because this could go. You've written a 20-page document. It's ridiculous. It could go. This could go.
22 pages, 8,400 words.
I have 4 hours on my microphone, and I have never, with the exception of like the static awards, in which case I would just delete. I've never looked at those 4 hours and gone, that might not be enough. Jess said, what time should I cook for? I said, don't bother cooking for a time. Just wait until I've finished.
See, I told Nadia if I'm not out by 8:15, call for help and go get food yourself.
Yeah, I'm so worried because why is it 20 pages long?
Because can I explain what happened?
Well, explain what we're doing.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, that's a very good point. So for those who are, because I have a feeling that if this gets posted on the Reddit, there's a chance this might acquire us some new listeners. So hello, by the way, for those people.
No, I think there's a chance new people will listen to it. I don't think it's necessarily going to acquire us any new subscribers or anything.
Well, yeah, sorry, I mean, I meant new listeners in general. I think I just interchanged the word subscriber.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Subscriber suggests, like, they're enjoying this bit so much they've already hit subscribe, which is very, very optimistic, I feel. But for new listeners, basically, this is obviously a Steven Universe podcast. It started as just us going through the episode by episode, me introducing Chris to the show, hence Steven University. But we've since been doing some hiatus content because we caught up to the show. And one of the ideas for an episode that came up while we've been talking about the upcoming movie was the idea that a live action movie. Chris posed the question, and the question was, to me, posed as in a world where Avatar: The Last Airbender happened, a studio goes to option Steven Universe the movie, and everyone shits themselves because that didn't work out so great last time. Beloved animated property from sort of American kids TV. They've gone, so don't worry guys, we've hired a fan, we've hired Dan, and that's me. And Chris said, what would you do with it? Now I assumed that Chris was expecting me to then go, I think I'd probably maybe think about casting these kind of people, and it'd be a story kind of about this, and it'd be like a 10-minute answer.
Tune in next week for my answer if you want to know more of what that type of answer looks like to this question.
But what happened in my head was that's because, for those who don't know, both Chris and I studied screenwriting at university, so I have an interest in narrative structure, storytelling, all that stuff. And when Chris posed the question, my mind exploded, and I went, "Oh my god, how do you do that? How does that work? How does that physically function? It's a show of micro stories. How do you get a grand singular story that doesn't feel like a series of vignettes out of the show? What, do you take one story and just bloat it? No, that's never going to work. You're not going to find a way to get all the mythology in neatly. Do you do this? Do you do that?" And I went through a million and one ideas in my head. And I just went, you know what? No, I'm actually going to make this a challenge for myself, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to try and suss out how I would, approach a Steven Universe movie just from a narrative perspective. And in the course of doing that, what happened was, so I wrote my first sort of outline, which was like a page, which is probably what I should have brought to this. That's what this required at most. And it was basically just a sort of an outline of what the plot would roughly be. But then I did a second pass of it, because I was like, let me just tighten up some of this stuff. Change a few words, add a few bits just to make it clearer what I'm talking about. And then it was longer. And then I had this really neat idea for not a neat idea, but like a real specific thing I wanted to do for the opening scene. So I kind of wrote that in more detail. And then every time I took a pass at it, because I had more ideas and more things I could smooth out and make better, it got longer. And that basically has happened for like 4 weeks for the 4 weeks since you've pitched it. I think it's been 4 weeks, something along that line. And
you know what I've been doing? I've been debating whether it's realistic that would be willing to play Garnet, and whether it's pushing it too far if you got and to play Ruby and Sapphire. I mean, that's what I've been debating. It's a very different level of thought, I think.
But that's fine because I like the idea that we'll get both versions of the answer to this question.
Yeah, I shouldn't have spoiled my big casting.
That's why I can cut it out if you want. I can bleep it. That's what I'll do. I'm going to bleep it so that when this goes out, they won't know who you've said, and we can find out next week. Tune in next week to hear what Chris will do with it. So should we just dive straight in now? We've kind of covered what it is, because otherwise we are going to be here all day, I think. The first thing I want to cover is
go up top. Go casting.
Well, no. There's no casting isn't really a concern. Let me just come to the.
But that's still an answer because I think I know what you've done with casting, so that's still a thing. Yeah.
Okay, we can do casting if you want first. And with casting, honestly, there's only two ways I would be happy to do this. But I suppose casting is going to really, for me, come down to how you're doing the crystal gems on screen physically. Right. So there was a version.
How are you doing the crystal gems on screen?
Well, this is it. So one of my first honest to God thoughts, Chris, was to do this movie Avatar style, entirely CG but super realistic. But I quickly decided that was probably not the way to go, and I started looking at maybe the Marvel model for how they do characters, and I like the idea of very, very good costume work being heavily supplemented by digital effects. Because they can look like they physically have presence in the scenes, but they're ultimately CG creatures. Creatures is the wrongest word there, but that both goes for the corrupted gems and the crystal gems. So that was kind of my starting point. But then I thought, well, if you're doing that, you're heavily adjusting to make them look more like the cartoon characters anyway with the computer, right? That's the same way that the costume Spider-Man wore on set of Civil War, because his actual costume hadn't been designed yet, was nothing like the one he ended up wearing. They just digitally adjusted it. So I thought, well, if we were living in that world, we could actually have the original crystal gems play their own roles, do the mocap. And when it becomes outside of there, like, so when it's the action stuff or like backflips and stuff like that, you sub in a dancer for Pearl or whatever to do some of the more important movement stuff. But for all the scenes, dialogue scenes, that sort of stuff, you bring in Dee Magno Hall, you bring in like Estelle. Why not? Why wouldn't you do that? Michaela Dietz, bring her in. Why not honor those people who've brought those characters to life? Because part of me, when I first did it, I immediately started thinking about who would I cast, and I thought all these names came to mind. And I just went, you know what? Honestly, if I've got full control, as the premise of this is, then I would want those voices back. I'm too attached to them. And I don't know if it would...
This is what they call the Disney Lion King approach to the term live action.
Not necessarily. No, because everything else I want. My initial idea was like going like Avatar or Lion King, but this new approach is actual sets, actual people, like a Marvel movie, all like real live action, but with heavily supplemented CGI on the gems to make them look alien, because that's really important. And also to make the world look unusual, because the world of Steven Universe has these weird, even when they're in Beach City, it looks otherworldly sometimes. So
are you digitally de-aging Zach a little bit then?
No, unfortunately you can't have Zach in that role because he's too old. He is sadly too old. So with every other major part, you would cast unknowns, complete unknowns, because you don't want, I think for the film like this, what you definitely don't want is to cast like I know I've seen I looked online and some of the people have suggested like years ago, suggested having like Manny from Modern Family play Steven and stuff, and like I get it, I understand the impulse.
Hold on, because I genuinely, what annoys me about that is I haven't chosen Manny. But I genuinely thought of some people like off my own back, and then like Googled their name and the phrase Steven Universe to find other people had previously suggested them. That's so nobody look up who's been previously suggested.
Fair. But I was looking at that and just thinking like the problem you've got with that is you're already putting onto that person that what they are capable of, and I want these people to be a little freer. Like you look at what they did with The Boys, and you look at Homelander, and that really works because I don't think many people are familiar with that actor.
Oh yeah.
For those who don't know, Boys is an Amazon TV show. It's a really good show, but there's an actor in it that's come from nowhere, as far as I can tell, and he was just stunning in the role. But because he brought no baggage from any previous roles to it, so I think completely cast unknowns. Talented people, obviously, you look for the right people, you find the people that fit the roles, but you do go unknown, with the exception of gem characters, which you can in fact get the original voice cast in for. I think to give something for the fans.
Except Stephen.
Unfortunately, except Stephen, which I reckon what you would have to do there is then get Zach a cameo at some other part. He can be a Bordy or something. Zach would have to appear, I think, but he couldn't play Stephen, and I think he would understand that. I think, yeah.
But you could. It's not happening, and that's the big thing. Like, people are waiting for that, like waiting for a child to get de-aged in a movie, and it will happen. Like, but the technology's not. Samuel L. Jackson didn't look too bad. Like, the Gemini Man trailer, that element of it looks all right. Like,
yeah. So
it will happen one day. But
so again, though, I put more focus on the script and the story. So.
Yeah, see, this is as we'll discover next week. I've deliberately done the counter argument to yours, which is why we're going to do them one week or another. Like, you've taken it very seriously. I've deliberately not necessarily taken it that seriously. So mine will be a bit more drum roll casting announcement.
Yeah, I think that's it's great because then I get to be a crazy person on a podcast, and then you get to do the question that was actually asked. So I made some rules for myself before I started writing anything down. By the way, and I just want to quickly go through those because I think these are interesting. I went for realistic budget, which is I think a given. You can't be like. It can't be like nothing I wrote in the script could be outside of the realms of affordability. Had to represent the show, but had to be absolutely accessible to a new audience. So I needed to spend a lot of time carefully selecting exposition and where to lay it into the story and what information comes when, because you have to bring an audience in, right? That was one of the other rules I came up with. I also decided that I would not throw any big story elements or visuals and force them into the movie just for the sake of an I remember that moment for fans. If it doesn't serve the story, it should not be there, and that also sadly goes for characters. But I have also made a note that small detail nods are fine. So Stephen can eat a cookie cat in the background, or other little visual small references like that. And as long as it's not affecting the scene or the story and shouldn't be there, then it's absolutely fine. I have decided to maintain the show's Stephen perspective rule. I think that's something very important to the show, and I've decided to keep that because the way that you learn information as an audience and when you're watching the show is through Stephen as he learns it. So you're on that journey with him, and the way you do that is you make it his perspective. You can't see something he can't see, so you don't get any separate scenes of the gems away talking. If you're hearing the gems talking without Stephen, it's because he's listening from elsewhere, that sort of thing. I also made a rule that any adjustments made to mythology can only be made in cases where they do not alter characters' backstories. And even then, it can only be done when needed to tell this particular story. I've got to respect the mythology. I think fans would lose their minds if we made any major changes to how anything in this world works, especially if it makes a character different in some way. I'm allowed to encouraged to lean into the show's darker themes, but it cannot become Power Rangers. This still needs to be appealing to younger audiences. The Power Rangers movie made a real mistake. Not a mistake. I think it was kind of perfectly pitched for us. But the problem with that is they were never going to earn new fans that way. It was a film for the people looking for nostalgia because it was a grown-up version of the Power Rangers. What they really should have done is something that was a bit of both, like a Marvel movie, something that can appeal to kids but also can appeal to adults. And therefore, you earn new fans as well as pleasing your old ones. So that was important as well.
Yeah, I think we've done a whole podcast on this. Fundamentally, the more I think about it, the big mistake the Power Rangers movie made, morph earlier, and then it would have been fine. But anyway.
Yeah, because you'd have more stuff for the kids.
Yeah, and I bet they're kicking themselves now because obviously two of them, Kimberly and Jason, have gone on to be like big stars.
Yes, so. Absolutely. Yeah, and they probably, I don't know if they actually cancelled those contracts. That's a different story. We'll come back to that. We do not have time for that tangent. And then the last
rumors of a further reboot, and the cast have not been given orders to come back for a sequel, so they're in the dark as well.
Interesting.
Carry on.
That is interesting. The last rule I put in place on myself, and these are all self-imposed, but I felt they were important to establish these things ahead of time before I started putting anything on paper, so I didn't get anything wrong immediately, and then have to make huge sweeping changes to what I planned. No surprises or changes to the show's show's story just for the sake of surprising fans. That will not benefit this story at all. So, you want to tell the story of Cheeseburger Backpack, but at the end, a monster eats the Sea Spire or something like that, just because they weren't expecting that. No, that doesn't help any storytelling. Don't do that. There's no gotcha storytelling, basically.
Yeah, it's difficult though, because you love Watchmen, and that breaks a lot of those rules.
I don't think it does.
It changes the end of the story.
Yeah, but not, and this is very carefully chosen, it doesn't actually change the mythology. They just change the MacGuffin. None of the characters get changed as a result of that decision.
True.
And they didn't do it. They didn't do it just to surprise me. They did it because it actually makes more sense in the flow of the story.
Fair enough.
Those sort of changes are acceptable outside of my rules. My rules are very specifically worded. I spent more time on the rules than I care to admit, Chris. Right, so
yeah, I don't doubt it. And now that you've outlined those 57 rules, we're all definitely going to remember. Let's crack on with the story.
So, Act 1. By the way, just so you don't panic here, Chris. This I've written out in more detail than anything else in the script because this I wanted to get just right. I had a weird inspiration for this. I thought back to, you're going to laugh, the original 1980s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's an insane premise, right? It's so much you've got to get people on board with very quickly. Because it's fucking Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And it basically does it in about a minute. It's incredible how quick, like a couple of minutes in, and you're like, okay, I get it, they're superheroes. And I thought, well, that's actually a really good thing. We're in a world of superhero movies. What if I just lean on the tropes of superhero movies so that people are instantly on board with the crystal gems? Because then you don't have to do as much explaining about what they're doing day to day. You get it. They're superheroes, like, essentially. Not literally. I'm not put them in capes, but do you know what I mean? The premise, that will translate to modern moviegoers because they're so used to seeing it now. So if you frame them kind of as heroes that way, then it all becomes a lot more palatable very quickly.
Yeah.
With less exposition. Yeah. So the story opens with Stephen in the temple, waiting by the warp pad expectantly. There's a few shots showing time progressing. One of him, like a child, like pretending to drive a stationary car, like standing on the warp pad, making the noises and flapping his arms. I just love that idea. Time continues to pass. Eventually, he falls asleep next to it with a blanket. Maybe MC Bear. Why not? He wakes up unexpectedly. Oh no, expectantly, and sort of looks around. Maybe they're back. Nothing. He sighs, he gets up, he goes out of the house, and the camera sort of pulls back to reveal the house built into the front of the temple, so you establish that for the audience as his sort of home, and then it's a big temple with this house at the front. He goes to the top of the hill and sits with his feet dangling over the edge, happily watching the beachside town with a smile on his face. This is how we set up our setting, beach city. You see, the people swimming and all the, the fun times of a beach town, because Stephen can see it, so you can see it. He goes to the big donut and explains to Lars. He meets Lars and explains to Lars that he's getting breakfast for the gems because they've been out all night saving everyone from monsters. Lars does his usual shtick of making fun of him. On his way home from the boardwalk, there's a big crash and screams that signal a monster attacking the city. He initially runs towards it wanting to help, but when face to face with the monster, he hides. He does not know what to do. This is not unexperienced Stephen. Back at the temple, light hits the warp pad and the unmistakable noise shows 3 sets of feet hitting it. Stephen talks himself into being brave talks himself into being brave and trust in his gem. He lifts his shirt and glances at it, and with a stern expression, he goes out to face the monster before it hurts someone. The shadows of the 3 distinct figures are now crossing the sand as they run along the beach towards the trouble. Stephen tries to talk to the monster, but it will not listen. It chases him under an old empty pier. It's just about to strike when the music kicks in, an instrumental version of the theme. A fist of an unknown savior connects with the monster's face, backing it under the pier. A long, pale leg sweeps a pillar, taking it out, and a purple blur spins towards the other pillar, breaking it completely, and it buckles, and the whole pier collapses onto the monster. A whoosh of red blur, and Stephen has been moved to the safety of the boardwalk. He looks up, dazed with his eyes struggling to see them in the bright sunlight, and as they focus, we reveal the 3 crystal gems, hero posing, standing strong, facing the wooden pier that they've just destroyed with the monster still under it. Pearl breaks the pose first, and kneels and asks if Stephen's okay. Amethyst points out, of course he's okay, he's got Rose's gem. Pearl reassures Stephen he did a good job leading it away from people, he was very brave. Amethyst, on the other hand, points out it looked more like being chased than leading. Stephen laughs, Pearl gives her a reproachful look. There's a big roar, and the monster climbs back out of the rubble. Pearl stands tall again with the other gems, ready for action. Stephen gets up and steps forward, standing next to the gems, but Garnet holds out her hand and holds him back. You are not ready. He deflates. Each gem draws their weapon from their glowing gem in turn. Garnet pulls her gauntlets, Pearl pulls the spear, Amethyst draws the whip. Stephen pulls up his shirt again and stares hopelessly at his glowless gem. The gems work as a team almost flawlessly. There is a moment where Amethyst is about to do something, but Pearl does it first and gives her a smug smile. When the monster is poofed, it falls to the floor, the gem does. Pearl picks it up softly, saying, I'm sorry, before bubbling it and making it vanish. A crowd gathers, and everyone is clapping the crystal gems. Mayor Dewey steps through the people smiling, yes, aren't they wonderful? But as soon as his back is to them, his smile drops. You told me you've protected us for thousands of years, and that most of the big ones were captured. As mayor, I think you should, and Garnet puts a finger to her lip, causing Dewey to fall silent almost immediately. Most does not mean all. You are welcome. Amethyst waves merrily, Pearl bows, and they leave, and as they walk along the beach, alone back to the beach house at sunset, Stephen pulls out his ukulele and announces he's going to sing their theme song. Amethyst sighs, not again, and his eyes seem doubled in size as he looks at each gem in turn, imploring for permission to do it. Pearl sighs, and Garnet says, if you must. And he plays the song, singing most of it to himself, at the end having to nudge the other gems into singing their names begrudgingly. And that's the end of the opening scene.
Do credits roll over Stephen singing the song?
Presumably, yeah. That would be my...
Yeah. Nice. Because what I like about that is it seems like that was sort of new dialogue, but so reminiscent of stuff we would have seen, which is quite clever.
Yeah, I tried to keep the voices of the characters, like, whenever I have used dialogue in this document, I've used the voices of the characters. It is completely new dialogue, but I have used echoes of old dialogue in this. But it's fine, Chris. We're through the first 1,000 words.
No, I liked it. I really liked it. I enjoyed that.
So the inspiration was the Turtles thing because it sets everything up. I'm very confident about how that works because you would set up Stephen's inadequacy because he can't pull anything out of his gem. You immediately get that. If you see them pull a weapon out of their gem and then cut to him looking at his, you sort of get it. He's a superhero in training. He's not ready. Garnet sort of...
But it also, I don't know where you go, but it also gives you potential hero moments at the end where you echo it.
Absolutely. Correct.
And I really love, and I'll probably nick it for mine, I really love Pearl looking at the gem and saying, I'm sorry, before bubbling it.
Yeah, I like that was. I think
nice.
Because of a plot element that comes up later, I felt that it was nice to set that up. I think most audiences will only subtly pick up on that, but fans will already know where that's going. I think, which is nice because it won't confuse anyone not listening to it, not watching it, because they'll be like, well, they've just beat it up. She's apologizing to it, but I think there's more to that. That we, as people who know the show will be aware. So at this point now, I start being a bit vaguer with some of the scenes. Some of the action scenes I have actually plotted out almost as specifically as that, but I'm gonna skim them through this if that's okay. Are
you gonna make the document available? Do you think anyway?
It's kind of written in like my shorthand, but yeah, I can maybe I'll go back over it. And one thing I did think about actually. Was maybe doing a video where I read it as dramatically as possible and set music under it and sound effects.
Yeah, that's quite a nice idea.
Yeah, so maybe we'll do that at some point. But yeah, so the next sequence of events is that we establish that Stephen is a gem in training. We're back at the house. We clarify that the gems, we sort of reaffirm that they protect Beach City and the wider world from these monsters, and that Stephen's mom was their leader. We do this through sort of like a couple of scenes, but also we set up a classroom gems session. So this is obviously from those digital shorts they used to do, where it was Stephen asking questions. They've actually set up. I like the idea they've got a classroom. They sort of that Pearl sets up in the back at the beach house with a blackboard and a little one single desk in the middle of the space that Stephen is lonely sat in, and like Amethyst, off to the side, like chipping in comments the whole way, like that sort of thing. So it's a good excuse to get a little bit of exposition out pretty quickly, because I think it's important people understand straight away how Gem's physiology works, that their gem is their person, and that the physical body you see is just a manifestation through light. Maybe hint at what poofing is. And then maybe have Stephen ask how that stuff relates to him, but Pearl would struggle to answer that question because, of course, Stephen is unlike anything else that exists. So you're sort of establishing those sort of things. He looks longingly over at sort of Rose's portrait. He's feeling kind of excluded, but he doesn't blame the gems for excluding him. We kind of make sure that we make that clear. I'm not sure exactly how in the scene, but we do that. He's aware he's young and not proven himself, but he feels like his human half is limiting his progress, and he worries his gem powers may never work because of his human side. Pearl does move on to the next topic in the classroom session and mentions fusion. His mind melts at that prospect. Pearl explains it takes two people to be in sync, relationship balanced, all that stuff. Amethyst asks why they haven't fused recently as she covers a sandwich in motor oil before eating it in a single gulp, taking the plate to the sink, which is full, and then throwing it out of the window. Just that visual. I just could not resist writing those words on paper.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, so Pearl ends session, everyone sort of like spreads out, and Steven actually is, we set up that they go to their rooms, so we do the doors, the lighting the doors up in the back of the temple with their gems, just so we know that exists. Steven continues to look at his own gem, and then the symbol on the door to Rose's room, the room he obviously can't access, and he's anxious. He goes to visit Greg in the car wash, and he tells him some of these concerns. They have some father. I think it's important we establish his relationship with his dad first, so it doesn't just go straight to Dad, I'm sad. It's like he goes and there's like a scene of them bonding. I don't know, they have a water fight or something. By the way, feel free to chip in at any point, so this isn't just me talking, Chris. If you've got, I'm happy to be interrupted.
No, I will. It's just, I think it's a nice, it's nice to hear you talk it through. So yeah, I'm waiting for moments to interject if need be. Well, so to clarify, all the other characters, presumably Rose is, the image of Rose is the actress who played her, but all the other characters, even Steven's dad, is unknowns.
Unknowns, yeah, that would be the idea, yeah.
Yeah.
That would be my preference. I think there are plenty of incredible actors out there that could nail these parts, and it would feel better than having Steve Buscemi play. Not Steve Buscemi. That's a bad idea. I'm trying to think who would. What's his name? What's the guy that was in Sideways?
Oh,
Paul Giamatti.
Giamatti.
You get Paul Giamatti to play Greg or something. Like, I don't know.
Do you wanna hear who I've got, but bleep it out for the audience?
Sure. Good choice. Great choice. Come back next week to find out what that is. I'm going to have to do so much. We can't do any more of those because I'm never going to remember to edit them all out.
I know, but that is one that people have suggested before. So
it's good casting though. Very good casting. In fact, almost perfect. So he talks to. There's some bonding time, but then eventually they get down to the nitty gritty, and he sort of says some of that stuff I was just talking about feeling inadequate. Greg points out that, wait, where am I in my document? That he's a sort of. It doesn't really matter, basically. The crystal gems didn't go to the trouble of building a house into the front of their temple for no reason. They believe in him, and even if that doesn't turn out, if he doesn't end up being, a full crystal gem or whatever, then he's still going to be an incredible person. And Rose wouldn't have. Rose didn't think being any part human would. Sorry, let me rephrase this as I've written it, actually. And if not, Rose didn't think being any part human would make Steven any less amazing. That's the exact words I wrote down. He just needs to be patient. Steven returns to the temple, not completely convinced. He thinks the gems are gone when he gets home. He's like, hello, no one's immediately there. So he goes to his bedroom and he's talking to himself, maybe to one of his toys. And he's sort of saying he doesn't know how to feel about it because his dad thinks he's going to be this amazing person either way. But he just wants to be a crystal gem and go on missions and help people. And he thinks he's letting the other gems down because he hasn't proven himself even the once. Pearl overhears this, and then the next day, Pearl tells Steven he's ready to come on his very first mission. Garnet has retrieved the moon goddess statue from the bottom of an ocean, and if they return it to the Sea Spire in time, they can save it from collapsing. And if that's all sounding quite familiar to you, Chris, we're sort of going to echo a little bit of Cheeseburger Backpack here.
Yep.
I don't know.
Good choice. It makes sense to go for an early episode that's very, explainy.
Yeah, covers a lot. At the sort of puzzled look on Steven's face, she explains what the Sea Spire is. The gem structure, the crystal gems had once used as a secondary base back in the day. He can't believe his luck, and it plays out pretty much as you expect. He thinks that he can't help with gem powers, but he definitely can bring supplies. And and he puts on his sort of iconic red shirt. He says he's been saving it for that moment, his first mission. he goes, "Crystal gems need a star." And she goes, "Where did you get that?" And he goes, "Oh, my dad has boxes of them. I could wear one every day if I wanted." She sort of sighs, and he gets on the warp pad with his backpack on. The one thing he can do is bring the moon goddess statue. Very excited. The warp pad lights up. He flips around uncontrollably because he has no idea what he's doing, and they're gone. They arrive. The Sea Spire is in terrible shape, as it was in the show. Pearl is particularly devastated to see it in such disrepair. She has some strong memories there. We have a bunch of sequences where they're sort of comedically getting Steven out of danger as he moves through the unstable ruins. He keeps asking Pearl and Amethyst to fuse because now he's heard about it. He's like obsessed with the idea. We even get a few bars of Giant Woman, but they keep telling him to shush, which he does not listen to. And then a monster attacks because he was playing the song too loudly. The monster immediately roars and knocks some stuff down, and Steven replies, "He seems grumpy," to which Amethyst responds, "Don't worry, Steven, I don't think your song was that bad." A battle commences, during which the sequence that we lean into Amethyst and Pearl's different personalities clashing. They can't quite work together. It makes it harder to beat this monster than it should be. But after poofing it, Garnet bubbles it, telling Steven that teamwork is important, and while Pearl and Amethyst aren't in sync, while they're not in sync, they won't be able to achieve something as great as fusion, glaring at them in a "be better in front of Steven" sort of way.
Nice. I was going to say, she got a bit of a Garnet stare on in that.
Absolutely. I think that's important to make sure that, like, I don't want to use the way that the show they're constantly like telling us Garnet's leader. I think it's better for this to show that Garnet is leader.
Yeah.
It works in the TV show because you want to establish it quickly. You don't want to take too much time of each episode showing Garnet being leaderly when you've got a story to tell and you've only got 11 minutes to tell it. But I think in a movie you can absolutely just show that she's the boss, like by having that sort of stuff. So they eventually get to the top of the spire where the plinth is. Steven's heart obviously sinks because he gets into his backpack with excitement, but he realizes he has forgotten the statue completely. The spire begins collapsing. Garnet throws him over his shoulder and leaps forcefully from the building. As it collapses around them, they slide down a staircase. A little bit of an action beat. But eventually all three gems come through a cloud of dust, landing gracefully one by one on a piece of remaining land in front of the rubble. Steven then awkwardly slides off Garnet's shoulder and face plants. Because I couldn't resist going for a really slapsticky moment. Again, trying to keep it for the... It's about being fun for everyone. So like there's verbal jokes, but also some like silly visual humor as well. I think kids will get more out of that sort of stuff. The dust settles on the pile of rubble that was the Sea Spire. A true moment of defeat for Steven. He stands in front of that sight. He's welling up. Pearl looks devastated, but she rearranges her face when she catches sight of Steven. He says, "I'm sorry, Pearl, I've let you down." And Garnet kneels next to him and says, "It's okay to make mistakes. Being a crystal gem is about far more than powers. You put too much pressure on yourself. I've lived for thousands of years, and I made a lot of mistakes before I got this awesome." She tips her glasses and then gives him a little smile. And she gives and a wink.
Nice.
Why not a wink? While checking through the rubble, Steven stumbles across an old mirror with a blue, cracked gem set into its ornate back. Pearl says she remembers that mirror and that it holds all sorts of gem knowledge, but it's broken. She says Steven's mother would have been able to fix it with her healing powers. Such a shame. Steven asks if he can try. Pearl hesitates, but on seeing the hopeful expression on Steven's face, smiles and says, "Sure, you can try." So basically, we're getting towards the end of the first act. You can sort of see where this is maybe going. When they arrive home, Steven finds the moon goddess statue on his bed, and he stares at it, a monument to his failure. Amethyst approaches and offers to play video games with him. This, of course, is a very good gesture from her. She understands how he's feeling right now. As they play, she sort of says he shouldn't feel too bad for being new to this. You know, when Rose found her, Garnet and Pearl had been fighting alongside her as the Crystal Gems for years, and she didn't know what she was doing, and she had to fail a bunch. So she says, you've got to fail to learn, and then fail some more, for fun. This is her sort of attempt to cheer up Steven, and he is a bit more encouraged by this. So he takes the mirror out to Beach City, where he continues sort of talking to himself about how he thinks he's going to fix the mirror. Just every ludicrous idea you can think of. He's going to rub ice cream on it. Like, I don't know, whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, just every ludicrous idea he can think of. He does bump into some townies. I'm thinking probably we establish some core ones. So, rather than having him once bump into everyone, we have a couple that show up more often. So maybe Lars and Sadie again, who he has already met at this point in the opening scene.
Are you avoiding Connie?
I will tell you now, and we maybe have a conversation here to sort of bring you more into this before I don't to break this up a little bit. But well, actually, I've got like 2 more sentences to get me through this base act, and then we'll quickly talk about Connie, if that's okay.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so he bumps into Lars and Sadie. Sadie's looking forward to summer because Beach City will be busy, and she hates being bored at the donut shop. Like, she likes to keep herself going. She has to keep an active mind. She goes crazy otherwise. Especially with Lars, who is mostly just excited about the busier summer months because he can't wait to meet girls. Sadie, of course, rolls her eyes. We do the sequence from Mirror Gem, where the mirror is actually been storing up phrases from these conversations, and it says Steven's name very loudly to warn him as a car nearly hits him. He avoids it thanks to the warning, and at this point realizes the mirror can kind of communicate, not properly. So he sits on the beach talking to it, and it starts responding using phrases that it's picked up through its mirror. He seems worried that it's like a person, but proceeds to talk to it. Mostly light, comedic, friendly chat, because he's a child. But he wonders if he should show the gems, but decides that he should figure out the mirror without their help, because if he does that, he feels maybe he'll be a real crystal gem. That's the end of the first act. So, well, we're getting through this quicker than I thought. Thank fuck. The Connie situation. Okay, so remember I said that we shouldn't force something into the story. Yeah. One of my rules was not forcing something into the story just so people have a thing. So when I started, I thought about all the iconic things you want to see in a Steven Universe movie, and that was both visuals, characters, the gems, weapons, like all the crazy visuals. You kind of think, God, wouldn't a Steven Universe movie be insane to see that? But sadly, if you want to tell a coherent story, you're not going to do that. And that was actually one of the mistakes the last Airbender movie made. They ticked all the boxes visually, except, well, the actual attacks all looked really weak sauce. But like a lot of the set design was stunning. Like the Northern Water Temple looked great. Appa, I thought, looked pretty good. Like they did get quite a few bits of the visuals right, and it did hit a lot of the iconic moments, but all of them rushed, done badly, nonsensical if you're not already watching or the show, if you're already familiar with the content. So I had to make some really hard choices. One of the choices was Connie, because I would like to do Connie right, and I think there's room
that's fair.
From this particular piece to do a sequel where Connie is the focus.
Cool. No,
I don't know how do you feel about that? How would you feel about that as a fan going in to see a Steven Universe movie, knowing from the trailers that Connie is simply not in it?
I think it'd be fine because you wouldn't know that for sure. You'd wonder if Connie was in it, and then I personally wouldn't mind it. I think, like you say, you can't have everything. I assume the diamonds aren't showing up. Like, there's just no. Sure. There's 5 seasons. Yeah.
If you divide it like sensibly, it's like 6 or 7 seasons, because obviously the first season was like twice as long or whatever. But it's 5 seasons.
But it's 5. It's 5 seasons of mythology. You can't do it all. And it's funny because I've made some similar choices. So I think there's a logical. You go down a logical way.
Yeah, and there's another thing I really. So when we get to the end of this, you're gonna hate me so much. When we get to the end, I do have 2 scenes I cut that I want to talk about briefly, because
that's fine.
One of them. I think it was something I desperately wanted to work into this story, but could not find a place for, and I'm really sad. But when I describe it, you'll be like, "That's really cool." But I think I made the right choice narratively, even if it hurts me to not have this moment. Okay, cool. It's not.
I think Act 1's sounding great. I think everyone's staying true to their characters. I think you're doing a lot of work to really. That it should be no surprise, but make it Steven's story, and I think that's quite a clever approach. And I think that would be a challenge for fans, because it's funny that so many of these choices, like the Garnet, the kind of knowing nod to Garnet's past, and all of that kind of stuff, are so fan heavy. But equally, there's obviously a slight risk in making it Steven focused when you're not having Steven played by Zach. But I think if you get the right actor
Yes.
then that's fine. I think it's a very accepting fan base, and I think, you know, Zach could be very positive and stuff.
So much of it lends to the casting. So much of it. And I'll be honest with you, what I would... especially this version of it, because the thing that strikes me most about Steven Universe is this enormous pressure put on what is a child. That he's a child. He's like 11 when the show starts, maybe younger. He's a child. It's tragic, but then seeing him rise to it is powerful. And I really do want to cast young. Like, I do want to cast a child. Like, you know what I mean? I think it's really important that you cast a very, very young unknown actor that can Macaulay Culkin his way to glory. You know, like, I don't literally mean Macaulay Culkin, but like, you know what I mean though? About like I think the impact of that would be. I think the impact of a lot of this would be lost. He still has to have the innocence of a child. Absolutely. It's so important to this story, and it's so important to the story of the show. So I'd be very upset if you didn't have that. So I think that's why I've lent into that.
Yeah, cool.
Next act.
Act 2, baby.
So we've established we've set up the story, and we've had our inciting incident. So we've not hit the meeting of the goddess yet, to go by Dan Harmons Story Circle, but we are on our way. So let's go. So where are we? So, the gems inform Steven at the start of the next act that he can't come on the next mission. It is too dangerous, even for someone in training. So they're going to be gone, maybe even for a couple of days. But Garnet lovingly tells him his mission is to keep their home and Beach City safe. She gives him the warp whistle to see if he needs anything, he can use it. But determined not to use it, he nods and says, "I got this." Now, I want to make a quick point there that is not one of those scenes where there's an object established so it can be reused later on. That is purely just a character moment, because you know that he's never going to use that, and we show him deliberately basically throw it in a drawer, and it's not foreshadowing for its use later. The reason I chose the warp whistle is because it's an actual thing from the show. It doesn't actually change the story, but it helps push the character forward.
But what I quite like about that is when he doesn't use it, it's then a twist, because most people, I think, would assume that he will end up using it. So not using it is quite a nice moment, and playing on expectations, which is nice.
Yeah, I hope so. Once alone, he tries to work out how the gem mirror works. He likes talking to it and decides that the problem must be that the gem is cracked, because he can see that visually on the back. He says, the gems told me that my mum could heal. She could fix you. Maybe there's something in her room. And he wonders aloud if his mother's room can maybe help him figure it out. And he looks to his gem again and the symbol on the door. He pulls up his shirt and sort of aims it at the door, hoping for it to work. That obviously does not work. It's not that simple. Later on, he's sat on the moonlit beach in front of the temple. Beautiful night, obviously clear, full moon, facing the ocean, playing his ukulele with the mirror propped up against a rock. He finishes the song and says, "A song didn't heal you? That was like my one idea." He picks up the mirror, which plays back a clip of someone laughing from earlier, because the mirror is obviously responding to him. He runs his finger across the crack on the gem's back. It's slightly loose. His eyes widen, and he grips it. Maybe if I just... And he starts to pull. The edge of the sea starts to bend away from where Steven is stood. Small trickles of water start forming an unusual shape under Steven's feet. A white light fills the beach, and an elegant blue winged figure emerges. Steven's eyes widen. Meet Lapis. She turns to face Steven. Her eyes mirrored. He can see his own reflection in them. She thanks Steven for freeing her and for actually talking to her. She's been trapped for such a long time. She can't believe anyone talked to her, let alone helped her. And he nervously asks, "Are you a gem?" And she says, "Yeah, I'm Lapis Lazuli." And they basically meet. And she tries to spread her wings, but her gem flickers, like the glow of it sort of flickers, and the wings vanish. A little visual thing that I'm doing more in this than is apparent in the show is when they're using their powers, the gems are reacting. It's a bit like Thanos and the gauntlet and how the gems glow when he uses them. I just think it's a good visual indicator. It's fine in the cartoon. You don't notice the difference, that the gem is or isn't glowing, because it's all sort of the way the colors work and the light works. It wouldn't really make too much of a difference to have a constant glow coming from their gem. But I think in this, whenever they're really using their powers, their gem glows. So Lapis's glows because she's suspending these wings. They erupted with her, but the gem glow flickers and the wings collapse. She's obviously the gem is still cracked. She's still not got the full powers. She reaches around and feels the crack in the center of her gem and goes, "My gem." And Steven apologizes and says it's his fault because he dropped an ancient gem structure on her. He's pretty confident the crack happened when the sea spire collapsed. I should have explained that earlier, but yeah, there you go.
Cool. That's nice.
Yeah, I'll add that to another. That's for the next pass, Chris. Stephen explains that the other gems will be thrilled to see her, but she looks apprehensive. He tells her not to worry, they're nice like him. She smiles and says so much has changed since she was trapped in the mirror. He asks how she got there in the first place. She mentions the war, but Stephen doesn't know anything about this, so she doesn't... When he questions her, she doesn't feel too much comfortable going into more detail, so she shuffles the topic. Sensing that past trauma, because he's a very astute and sensitive and empathetic child, he actually decides to cheer her up. He dubs them Beach Summer Fun Buddies and takes her to the boardwalk. He wants to show her that there's no war anymore and that people are happy. The Earth is different to whatever she's referring to. So we get a sequence where we maybe meet a different boardie than we've already met. Maybe we bump into Lars and Sadie, I'm not sure. But basically, they're having fun. They're either playing video games or carnival games at like the Funland Arcade or Funland itself, on the pier, roller coasters, whatever. And that, so not a montage as such, but a sequence of them talking while that's happening. We then sort of, later on in the evening, they're sat on the end of the pier while Stephen's eating fry bits. Again, a visual reference, nothing actually too big. Again, I've permitted myself to make a bunch of little visual references, even though, because they don't affect the story. Lapis is looking sort of a mixture of curious and disgusted at Stephen eating the fry bits, because why not? He explains about the beach and how not everyone lives near the water on Earth, so they travel from all around the country just to spend the summer where it's hottest and at the water. He takes Lapis to the temple. She's apprehensive upon seeing it, but seems to be building a trust for Stephen. He opens the freezer, grabs a cookie cat, and in the back of the freezer, again a visual nod, a glowing wristband glow stick sits at the back of the freezer for future use. I'm sure. Have you left the mic or anything, Chris? Because I can hear sounds that suggest you've got off mic.
No, not at all.
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought it sounded like you wandered out the room while you were listening to me.
Oh, no, that's worrying. If there's background noise, then I can't hear it because I've got my headphones on. So
that's
apologies.
No worries at all. Yeah, so that's obviously a little nod to Connie, and it gives you the option to do the Connie. You've put the reference in there for if you want to use Connie at a later date or time.
Which is awesome.
He offers Lapis a cookie cat. She is not interested, and he eats one as he talks her around shows her around the temple. He introduces her to his toys. She finds these funny and introduces herself right back, shaking hands with a guy figure. But she does look apprehensively at the warp pad constantly. Again, that sort of stuff.
Why a guy figure and not MC Bear Bear?
We've already done MC Bear Bear. Why not throw another one in?
I just love the visual of it being MC Bear Bear.
Okay, well there you go. It's MC Bear Bear. Sure, she can shake the hands of a bear. Yeah, why not? I think for me it was more about that scene isn't really about making another reference. That's about showing how much of a child he still is. Again, you're just re-establishing this is a child. This is not someone who should be dealing with any of this. This person's talking about war. They're fighting monsters. There's a reason they're not telling him anything. You have to. I wanted to. It was really important that the audience understood why the gems weren't keeping him in the dark, because he shouldn't know about this stuff and he shouldn't be going on missions here. He is too young. And so he says. So she looks at the warp pad a little bit apprehensively. She's still nervous about these gems, evidently. And he sees her doing this and says, I miss them a lot when they're on their awesome gem missions. I sometimes stay with my dad when they're away, but sometimes I stay to help protect Beach City. She laughs and says, I'm sure you do a great job. And he says, well, maybe you can join us. You can train with me, and then we can be buds all the time and hang out when the gems go on missions, and we can protect the Beach City together. She asks exactly what Beach City needs protecting from, and Stephen explains monsters and stuff. She repeats this word to herself, monsters. So Stephen says he'll show her, and they go through a small passage in the rock, down a long spiral staircase, and end up in the burning room, surrounded by the dozens and hundreds of floating bubbles with gems in it. Lapis looks...
Which could be a great visual.
Oh, yeah, in my head, that's like the grandest thing ever. Like, it's this dinky little spiral staircase that suddenly opens up into this insane room with all these gems in these bubbles. I think that's such a cool idea. So she's horrified. Stephen, these aren't monsters. These are gems. She says, no, you must be confused, but these are the monsters. They hurt people and they act like animals, and that's why we have to safely bubble them and store them here. And she backs away. This isn't right. She runs up the stairs. She runs and heads for the door of the house and stops halfway across the living room when she looks up and sees the portrait of Rose Quartz looming over her. She falls to her knees. Stephen comes up behind her asking what's wrong. Your crystal gems? She asks the question. He nods and shows her his gem. It's been raining. It started raining outside since they went downstairs. They look at each other for a moment. Lightning punctuates the silence, and she says, I should have known those gems down there are prisoners, just like I was, a prisoner of the crystal gems. And she runs out into the rain, Stephen following her. She's running along the beach. She tries spreading her water wings to get away because Stephen is following, but she only gets a few feet off the ground before the flicker again, and she finds herself tumbling back to the sand. This actually gives Stephen time to catch up. He says she doesn't understand, and he wants answers. Why is being a crystal gem so bad? Are those things really gems like her, like her, the crystal gems? He needs to know. And all the questions sort of spill from him at once while he's panting and running. She sighs, and the rain slightly eases up, but she stands with her feet parted and puts her hand together, concentrating. And this bit, I've described it in a lot of detail, but I'll try and describe it more naturally rather than reading my description. But basically what she does is, it looks like she's creating a glass bubble and expanding it out, but what she's actually doing is just repelling the water in a perfect circle. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, that's
so.
Cool.
It's
that's
like
cool
so. What she's actually doing is just making the water sort of like a magnet, not go near them. But it creates this effect that they're in a glass bubble because she expands it and expands it and expands it until it covers both of them, so they're out of the rain. But the rain is hitting this bubble and rolling down it, and you know when water's running along glass and it creates that shimmery effect.
Yeah.
Inside the bubble, that is all you see around you. But the beach is obviously like this moonlit beach, but the whole thing is just like lit now through these sort of shimmering images. Nothing is in focus.
That's a great visual.
Yeah, I just thought like you got to do something interesting with her powers that you've not seen before. So that was my idea. So I've described that for a reasonable amount. But she basically they sit down and she asks Stephen why he doesn't already know this stuff. But then she starts to tell him the truth. She says the gems are not from Earth. They have a homeworld millions of light years from this planet, and as she says this, she sort of pulls a bit of water from the bubble and manipulates it into shapes to illustrate the story she's telling. Because when Lapis tells this story in the show, I think there's two versions of it. There's one where she just says it and we get a flashback in that sort of the answer style, but there's another one where she like taps a pond, or not a pond, like a lake or something, and it shimmers and the images appear in it or something like that. I can't remember exactly how that one works, but it's like reflected in it. I guess it's all in her imagination. I'm not sure. But basically in this one, to illustrate what she's saying, she pulls a bit of water from the bubble and then uses her powers to manipulate it into the shape that she's describing. So like she talks about Homeworld, it forms visually Homeworld out of water.
Yeah.
So she explains that the crystal gems are a group of gems who rebelled against Homeworld on this planet, and that a war broke out. She explains Rose Quartz was their leader, a war criminal, and that many gems were shattered as a result of her war. Stephen doesn't understand shattering, so she has to explain that a gem's physical body is, when they're damaged seriously, they poof, but if the gem itself is hurt, they can be shattered, and this is effectively death. He shuffles very uncomfortably at this. Lapis explains that she wasn't she wasn't a real fighter. She was just a worker gem that got caught up in the fighting, and that the crystal gems wouldn't listen and poofed her, and that she wasn't that she was left alone basically on the battlefield, and she wasn't left there long enough though before Homeworld then found her. They assumed she was a crystal gem, put her in the mirror, and were questioning her. When Homeworld retreated, she was just left, and that's when the crystal gems found her, and she ended up at the Sea Spire. She says she tried to communicate them a bunch of times the same way she did with Stephen, but they never listened, they never noticed. She was left discarded and ultimately broken. They sit in silence for a minute, and Stephen says, I'm sorry that happened to you. I didn't even know there was a war. Then Stephen tries to confess he's Rose's son, but Lapis doesn't really understand this concept. So, obviously, gems don't have fathers, mothers, children, and daughters. So he pulls up the shirt to show her the gem, and he goes, "My gem belonged to Rose Quartz." But she leaps to her feet and says, "You're Rose Quartz?" And he goes, "No, she's gone. It's complicated. I'm Stephen, but I have her gem." A very long silence pauses that. She looks mortified and confused and unsure of everything. Like her whole world has just collapsed around her. The war criminal she knew is essentially standing in front of her, but he's a small human child. Like she literally can't comprehend what she's seeing. But then the silence is punctuated by a muffled sound. It sounds like someone shouting, and it gets sharper and louder, and then audible you hear, "Stephen! Stephen!" And as they look around, through the distorted shapes and colours that you can clearly see the three crystal gems running towards them. Lapis looks fierce.
Again, a really nice visual.
Oh, I've tried to make it as visual as possible to like take advantage of the movie, because like as I was writing it, I was like, this has to feel like a movie. It can't feel like they're all just stood around talking in rooms, because the TV show does that, because it's a TV show and it has a budget. But we're here, we can make everything look and sound awesome. So let's just go nuts.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so you can see why for a minute I did consider making this fully CG, because a lot of this stuff would be easier if the whole movie was CG. But I do think it's important. I think you get a tangibility and weight to real human bodies in the scenes.
Yeah, I agree.
And real locations, so I think that's important. So basically, I'm going to skip. This is where a little bit of a fight happens, essentially. I'm going to sort of skim through this. But basically, Steven's like... She tries to fly away straight away, but that doesn't work because her gem flickers again. She can't seem to... The wings are really not happening with the thing, but she does sort of... Wait, let me just catch up where I am because I've lost myself in my document. Oh, yeah, that's it. So oh, yeah.
Don't worry about giving us the details, dude, if it's easier.
No, I'll just give you a little summary. So basically, they stare each other down, but she basically realizes who the crystal is. She literally recognizes at least some of them. So she says, you three, you saw that mirror and you didn't help me. Did you even wonder who I used to be? Which is a direct line. The Stevens draw their weapons. Steven, run, they tell him. But he tries to explain, no, she's not here to hurt us, but it is far too late. Immediately, Pearl leaps at Lapis. Lapis makes a staff out of water and deflects it. But a cracked gem flickers again. She's not doing it. So there's a bunch of stuff that happens here. There's some I've got a bunch of cool visuals. I'll just kind of skim over those. But one of my favorites is she's firing these beams at Pearl. Pearl is dodging them, and just as she lands in front of Lapis about to swing, Lapis just lifts up one of her arms, and a huge gush of water just comes from under Pearl and launches her into the air, like a massive just cannon from underneath.
Nice.
Just fires her into the air. I just think that's a really cool visual. Amethyst does try to use the spin dash attack, but she just surrounds her in water and actually slows her down, while she's spinning back to her normal speed. Garnet tries the gauntlets. That doesn't really work because, again, she's able to block them. All that stuff is happening, and the whole time Steven is trying to tell her to stop, basically.
And she getting more and more manic as she fights them.
Exactly. And then the crystal gems, no one is listening to Steven at this point. And then eventually she knocks all the crystal gems back, and by throwing out her arms, all of a sudden it stops raining. But it doesn't. They look up, and she's just holding the entire sky's worth of rain.
Wow.
30, 40 feet in the ground. Because the noise of it was also making it here, because it's so loud and thundery that Steven's yelling was also partly being missed because of that. And she turns to Steven, she says, "Let's go." And he says, "Go where?" And she goes, "Home." And Steven goes, "But Beach City is my home." She looks hurt. Steven he sees this, even though he looks at himself sort of through her reflected eyes, and she says, "Fine." She tries to fly away with the wings again, not working. And as the gem flickers, all of a sudden the rain, the ceiling she just created, caves, and not rain falls, but essentially just buckets and trucks full of water just all hit the beach at once. And in the chaos of that, she steps into the ocean and vanishes.
Wow.
And then in the rain, Steven speaks, and even through the rain, you can tell he's got tears in his eyes. He turns to the crystal gems. He asks them questions. He's confused. He's hurt. He wants to know why they attacked her. She's a gem like them. And he asks if it's just because she's from Homeworld. Garnet and Pearl exchange very nervous glances at that. They do not have answers, and they do not know how Steven even knows what Homeworld is. And then he adds, "You say you want me to be a crystal gem, but you don't tell me anything." And he leaves. Pearl starts to follow, but Garnet holds up her hand and says, "No, we have to let him go." And a sheen gleams over her glasses. This is important. I love that. That's such a Garnet moment. So when Steven arrives at home, he looks back over his shoulder at the picture of Rose Quartz, and he's talking to it, and he doesn't understand if she really started a war. He's unsure how he feels about anything because his whole life he's looked up to her. It's very complicated, and he eventually utters in all this, "I just want the truth." And the gem on his belly glows. He gasps, and the gem signifying Rose on the door glows, and it opens, and the room is revealed in all of its pink light glory.
Yeah.
He steps inside, completely unsure. It looks endless. He says hello, but there's not even an echo. He wonders even aloud why the room... He opens his mouth and sort of explains, why did this room even open for me? And the second he says that, the room shifts and becomes the living room again, with him in it, watching himself say, "I just want the truth," and then goes back to being a pink void. So he asked the question, why did this open for me?
Yeah.
And the room immediately demonstrated he asked for it to be opened. He gets out his camera to see if he can take a picture of it, because he's like, "This is crazy." And in the camera, it's just black. There's just darkness. He's in a dark room. So he realizes the room can show him stuff, and he says he wants to see his mum. And Rose appears in the center of the room. His eyes get a bit watery, but then he turns to determination. He goes, "I want the truth." Rose splits in two. One brightly lit, smiling with open arms. One cast in shadow, holding a sword and shield. He doesn't understand. He asks who she is, the hero or the war criminal. Suddenly the room shifts and Stephen is standing in space, looking down on the Earth. He can hear the birds chirping, people laughing. A gem ship flies past, heading towards Earth. It's actually an injector, a fleet of them, in fact, as they go past him. It's like that shot from the opening of Star Wars. And they're all landing on different parts of the planet. Then the green turns to brown and then to grey, and it erodes. And the sound of the animals and the voices, they just die. And with a big whoosh, Stephen is suddenly on the surface in a canyon. Lots of dead trees, plants, but injectors sticking out everywhere. Hundreds of gems bursting from the ground. Then another whoosh. Pearl, garnet, and rose stood. The pink flag of rose quartz and the crystal gem behind them standing tall. The room spins again. But now there are two... Once again, he's facing the two versions of Rose. He says it out loud. The hero or the war criminal? And he goes, you're both. The homeworld gems were going to destroy this world and every living thing on it. To make more gems, you had to fight to stop them. I get it. Another shuffle, and shapes from Homeworld can be seen retreating into ships.
Hold on, because you was a slight infliction there. I think you almost paused in the wrong place. They were going to take over the world to make more gems. You had to stop them. Yeah?
He's talking to Rose, so he says you had to fight.
No. It's just you. It's just you went to make more gems. You had to stop them. Whereas I think you meant.
Oh, I see.
They're doing that to make more gems. You had to stop. Do you see what I mean?
Sorry, you had to fight to stop them. Sorry, that's the line. I read it wrong. You're right. Sorry.
No. I just want to clarify what
sorry.
Stephen's saying is, what their plan was. He wasn't being like, to make more gems, you had to stop them.
Yeah, agreed. Exactly. So there's another shuffle, and the shapes from the Homeworld gems you see them retreating onto ships, but they take off before everyone can leave, and they're just shapes. We don't see any of these gems indistinct. It's kind of a little bit like the answer. It's just sort of shapes that indicate bodies and beings with clear gems on them, so you know that they're gems. They're retreating onto ships, but the ships leaving most of them behind. They leave early. And another whoosh, and he's back in space, and three hands each surround him. One over his head, white. One to his left, yellow. One to his right, blue. And you see a beam shoot towards the Earth. Then another whoosh, and he's on the beach. Rose summons her shield and holds it up, protecting Pearl and Garnet from the beam as it reaches the surface. And then Stephen is once again facing Rose, but this time it's just one. Half cast in shadow, tears in her eyes. All the other gems, you see them around her, being hit by the white beam and falling, morphing into monsters, large and small. And then Stephen says it out loud, Homeworld, when they lost, they... And he swallows. He can't finish that sentence. She could only save the crystal gems. He sighs. Thank you, room. His gem glows, the door opens, and he leaves. Oh, it's a big moment.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about the big thing there.
Yep.
First of all, and the reason I'm silent, by the way, is because I'm just like it's a pleasure to like. It's like I'm at a live reading. Like that's awesome.
I'll take that as a massive compliment. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. No. I'm really enjoying like just listening and stuff. So don't think that my and if you could hear creaking, then it was Jess nipped in with a drink, which is very kind.
That's nice. Thank you. I send my thanks to Jess for keeping you nourished while I ramble for 2 hours.
No. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So I don't want you to take my silence as a sign of anything.
No, of course not. No.
So, but I'm equally.
Let's unpack some of that. Yeah, let's unpack. There's a lot in that. That whole section is. So this, I mean, in the Dan Harmons Story Circle, this is known as the Chaos Period. So this is the section of the story where like it all just falls apart. But for the hero, like there's a lot of turmoil here. So I sort of shook things up in quite a few different ways.
Yeah, so for me, there's a massive compliment and a big question. So the massive compliment is I think that entire beach scene with Lapis is wonderful. I think it's brilliant. I think visually it sounds amazing. I never thought I would say this sentence, and I actively like avoided watching the film until Jess was like, "Come on, let's watch it." But Aquaman really opened my eyes to what you could do with visuals. Like
yes,
and like and like a lot of that is like
it's a bad movie in many ways, but the visuals in that film are fucking stunning.
That scene where they go into the deep is just insane.
With the flare, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that alone, like, 100%, absolutely. I thought about that as well because in my version of this world, their gems glow when they use them. So a dark, rainy beach. Think of them diving into the water with. I've not physically written that down, but in my head, every time they're using their powers, their gem's glowing and it's casting a blue or a white or a sort of like a red light, or depending on the gem that's being used, across the beach, which I think is a really cool visual, because that was what was so cool about the Aquaman scene, was that it was pitched by the flare, this very deep red source of light entering into this very blue source of light, and I thought that was visually very cool. So I was kind of thinking of evoking that, not that scene exactly, but certainly there's a correlation
spirit,
there.
Yeah. So the big question is, you've given a lot, like you've like the hands, like, and it's a real, like, that was a genuine like reaction, but obviously you're choosing to tell a lot of the mythology. You're choosing to give a lot of the mythology, away. Talk a bit about that decision and why you came to that.
Well, I mean, the big thing that when you think about what we've gained in that sequence, is he doesn't know who the three hands are. They're just Homeworld, right? You only know they're the diamonds because you know they're the diamonds, right? So when you actually break that scene down, what I love about that scene is that you think it's giving away so much, but when you think about what he knew by the time Mirror Gem, Ocean Gem went around, he knew that they were aliens. He knew about Homeworld. He knew that Lapis had been poofed unfairly as part of the war. That might have come slightly later, actually, but he knew that there'd been a war. He knew. One thing he definitely didn't know at that point, to be fair, that I have given away, is that that Homeworld, the piece of information that's brand new,
the corrupted gems,
but you didn't know exactly how it happened, but you knew it happened because there's a scene in Ocean Gem, where Pearl says to Steven that we're always fighting gems, because he says gems shouldn't fight, and she goes, we're always fighting gems. Those gems were corrupted. They were so we know that, like, you know that by that point. But also, I'd say, if you can think of a really clean way to get a piece of information into a story where it actually has impact on the story and Steven's turmoil, there's no reason not to, because we're doing films here, not TV shows. So yes, in a TV show you want to drib and drab, right? But at most you're going to get 3 movies out of a situation like this, maybe 4. Do a Hunger Games. Do you know what I mean? So there's a lot of the stuff you got in that he kind of knew, but vaguely at this point. I've been more overt maybe with the specifics, but he knew about corrupted gems. He knew about the war. He knew, he didn't. The big thing I've kept back is Pink Diamond, Rose Quartz, killing her. That's the big thing that I could have. That's the trump card I could have played here. That would have been like really made him question his mother. But what I liked the idea of playing on this duality of not, because he doesn't know his mother. The shock to the system for a character that must be to have this image of someone in your head and then realize that they were potentially as flawed as anyone, and I also think it really does. There's a scene that comes up, there's some moments that come up towards the end of this where the decision he makes is a direct result of what he learns here, and I feel like if he didn't learn everything he learned here, he wouldn't make the same decision in the script I've sort of devised. It was a very careful balance, and I think if I was ever actually to execute this to a full script, which wouldn't take much work because I'm very close, aren't I? Really, I maybe would tweak exactly what you see, but
no, because I think showing the hands is such a cool moment if you're a fan. Like, hearing 100%. It described was an awesome moment. So yeah, I'd be tempted to keep them in.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. Because I don't think you get anything from that. It's Homeworld. You learn. This is where you learn that Homeworld corrupted those gems. So you're just seeing 3 hands shoot the beam. You just go, oh, it's like a dream sequencey thing where it's kind of metaphorical, right? Like you're not going, well, who are those people? Well, you might be, but you're not doing that in a way that's like, well, that's the setup for the villain. I hope if it's written and executed well enough, the idea would be what you're thinking is, oh no, that these Homeworld people weren't so great. They left half their bloody people behind and then did away with them, because the next image of Rose being a singular figure, half in shadow, half in light, well, all of those things morph around her because she could only save the crystal gems.
So I have a question on that as well.
Sure.
It may not be one you've thought of because it's not one I've thought of, but it is. I think it is an interesting one. obviously you've kind of got an answer for this because you've got that great scene early on where Amethyst relates to
one of the reasons that scene exists is because I wrote this and then went, shit, you'd be asking where the fuck is Amethyst?
Well, that's which is what I'm building to in my question, because
Sure.
they kind of an obvious thing to remove because it's a movie, and you know, stuff has to be moved, and an obvious overcomplication that you can get rid of would be to make Amethyst a crystal gem from the start, so that you're not, because it's a lot of information to give someone that knows none of this information. So it's potentially just making Amethyst a crystal gem with the other two simplifies that. Did you toy with that at all, or?
That's a really good question, and I'll be honest with you. I did think about that, but then I went back to my rules, and I don't want to make changes to the mythology that change the character. And I think Amethyst's character is so based on having gotten to the race late. It's so based on her feelings of inadequacy because she doesn't have the history with the crystal gems. Bismuth shows up, and she doesn't know who the fuck Bismuth is.
So would you want to explore that in a later movie? Because there's probably no room for it here.
There's no room for it here, but I wouldn't want to lop that option off at the arm, just for simplicity's sake here. I think if you can make it work, and I think adding one simple scene, which actually turns out to be quite a nice character moment of Amethyst comforting Stephen earlier, because I added that scene for practicality, but then when I actually put it in, I went, oh no, this is a really nice moment. She gets to sit down and be big sister. Like, that's actually great. Like, perfect. And she had there's a really obvious and nice reason for her to say what she's saying. It's not like she's talking about sandwiches and then suddenly goes, oh, by the way, I came out late. Like, you know what I mean? Like, she's talking about having to go through what Stephen's going through. That parallel is perfect. You know, she's saying, look, I came late too. You know, you've come late. They're already established. You're having to catch up. I get it. Me too. Like, I did the same. You know, I didn't get this awesome by accident. Like, I had to work like we all do. And we had to make mistakes.
It's such a hard balance, isn't it? Because I agree with you completely. You gotta, what you need to be careful of in the execution is that you avoid that fucking god awful last 20 minutes of Prisoner of Azkaban, where all the exposition is just thrown at you in a way that if you don't already know it, you don't understand it.
Well, exactly.
Film, obviously.
So that's the great thing about not to blow my own horn, but the keeping Stephen's perspective. The gift of that is you learn with Stephen. Stephen has to be told this information, or he won't be able to make character decisions. So because the crux of this story is Lapis basically drops the bomb of the information in the world of Steven Universe and changes everything that he thought he knew. By the way, incidentally, in Dan Harmons Story Circle, that is the meeting with the goddess, which is perfect in this moment because when she first appears, she does seem very sort of angelic and godly.
But also everything you've set up by having the cinematography paint them as heroes in the beginning.
Yes.
Fight scene. The hero poses their arms out to save people, to save Stephen. Like the iconography you're using there is setting them up in the eye and emotional reactions of the watcher as heroes.
Well, exactly. And what's great about that is when you get this moment where Lapis sort of makes you question them, and you go, well, actually, this little boy don't know shit. Maybe they're monsters. Maybe they are hurting other people. Like, you don't know for a minute. Like, if you're new to this, like, you don't know. So I like the idea. I think this is one of those for me, this is one of those perfect balances between surprising your audience, but also, because I think people watching this, once they see Lapis come out that mirror, they think they know the rest of the movie, right? They must do. They go, oh, she's going to come out. There's going to be turmoil. They're going to have a big fight. The ocean will go, whatever, blah, blah. But, like, I think for me, what I like about this is I don't think anyone's expecting that info dump. And I don't think anyone's expecting Lapis to be the one to tell Stephen this stuff. That didn't happen in the show, obviously. I think Lapis sort of being the catalyst for all his suddenly learning things creates a temporary rift between him and the gems. It's as you get to the end of the second act, which by the way, we are just a few paragraphs away from, which is quite, I didn't realize until just now. But the idea is you want him at his lowest point at the end of the second act, right? So that's questioning everything. That's like that moment.
So, did you consider then, because you've got, and none of this is a criticism, I think it's fantastic. This is for the purpose of discussion. You've got, with that in mind, and the fact that you've got to vastly visually different, but fundamentally two expositional scenes. One where Lapis dumps the exposition, and one where the room then tells the exposition. Did you consider having a scene in between those? One to make more of that. Are the gems the bad guys? Stephen's, disagreeing with them stuff, other than kind of the fight, and one to break up the two and two to break up the expositional scenes. Did you play with that or consider that at all?
I did. I definitely did. And the problem you had was that then it becomes Stephen's I just don't understand you, the whiny teenager character trope. Do you know what I mean? He's angry at mum, and I think the fundamentally what I think is wonderful about Steven Universe is these characters, when they disagree, they still don't yell and fight. They don't. That's not what they do. They're not the Avengers. They do love each other and they do care for each other. They are a family and they treat each other thusly. So I think he respects them too much to throw a full on tantrum and fucking dick punch someone and just, do you know what I mean? He's like, do you know what I mean? I didn't want him to come across as a stroppy teenager, and I also wanted him to get the information through the room because I like the visual rather than him yelling. Because in reality, if he was like, but why this? They would just go, well, this. And he'd go, oh. So there was a problem with that.
In all senses, the contrast between the two scenes, I think, makes it okay.
There is one
two expositional scenes near each other.
Yeah, but I think the other benefit that it would get in execution that it hasn't had here is the fight scene is actually a pretty decent length fight scene. I've plotted out a sequence. So there's a fight, isn't there? He gets the information from Lapis, then there's a fight scene, then he goes to the room. After a dramatic moment where Lapis and him have a brief conversation about whether he's going to come with her. Yeah. So it's not as on top of each other as it comes across when I'm reading it from here, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely fair. And again, it wasn't in any way a criticism.
I understand it. No, it's a very good point. And your thought process is exactly my thought process. But when my brain went there, it went, damn, we have problems here because he just comes across as a whiny teenager. A and B, they would just tell him the answers, and then there'd be no tension.
I can't wait.
You've got to avoid that.
I'm so intrigued and fearful of the second part of this 2-part thing we're doing, because you'll be like, so did you think about this and its implications like what I've just done? And I'll go, no, not really.
If you if you want to take the time to do it differently, you're absolutely welcome to. But I don't mind that it's a contrast. I think that's fine. I
think that's fun.
I think that's fine. I think that's a fun idea. I like the idea that it would be more about practicalities. You in a weird way, I've gone, okay, I'm the writer of the Steven Universe movie, and you've gone, I'm the producer of the Steven Universe movie.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's the difference. So it's two different perspectives on the same idea. I like it.
I've got a plot, but we'll say I've not quite finished it yet. But I've got the basis, and it's funny. I've got the things that I've also got. People will be like, "Did you nick that from Dan?" And I'll be like, "No." It's just I think the Lapis of it all in particular is a really logical anchor for a first movie.
Oh, you've done the same thing. I see.
No. I've got Lapis, and I've kind of done the same. I've done it in a different way, but anyway, we'll get to that. So basically, definitely Lapis is a focal point. Go on, carry on.
So just the very end of the second act is that basically he says thank you, room, and leaves. And when he leaves, he comes out of the room. The gems are all in the kitchen. They don't see him come out of the room because they're in the kitchen, but he does overhear their conversation with a little nod to the test here, because the gems are debating whether they should have told him the truth sooner. Garnet points out that they all agreed he was too young, but Pearl seems really tormented, says that it seemed like the right thing to do at the time, because she just wanted him to have a normal childhood without the stress of knowing about their past and the weight that rose quartz would put on a child. After a pause, Amethyst exclaims they're bad at this, and they all look a bit taken aback, but she explains, just like in the test, that, well, not just like in the test, it's slightly adjusted for the circumstances, which is, he released Lapis on his own because he didn't know any better. The other two can't control him, and he definitely shouldn't be taking advice from her, and they don't have Rose to guide them anymore. And Pearl feels someone still needs to show him how to be a gem, but Garnet points out that he isn't a gem. And the last thing Stephen hears before he goes upstairs is that Garnet saying, there's never been anyone or anything like Stephen. We don't know what he needs. And he goes to bed, head hanging low, without them seeing him. But then he wakes up immediately hours later, panic knocking on the door. The temple door is coming off its hinges. The gems open the door, and Stephen from up on his little bedroom platform looks down. Greg bursts in and tells Stephen the gems, the ocean is gone.
I think what's interesting about that is I was about to ask whether you toyed with having Greg in that parental "we don't know what to do" scene to embed.
Oh, that's a good idea.
That side of Greg.
That's a really good idea.
But then you lessen the ocean is gone bit. You can't, because then when you mentioned Greg's name, I was like, oh, he's done that instead. But no, I was just curious.
So I think the idea is that you end it on, like, this is the work of Lapis. Stephen knows this, and it's his fault. This is all his fault. So that's the end of Act 2. Act 3 is shorter than Act 2. It's about the length of Act 1, so this shouldn't take us too much longer. I am sorry for listeners.
I'm having a great time, but you don't need to keep apologising.
I'm apologising to the listeners more than you, Chris. No, I'm enjoying going through it because it is interesting to hear your perspective on it. So this is fun. When you've been working on something for as long as I've been working on this, like it's interesting to sort of like this has been. I've been thinking about this pretty much every day since you said it.
I think you've made so many great decisions, and I think like having that conversation and having, because it reminds me of the test. It reminds me of 3 gems and a baby. It reminds me of the amethyst scenes in the Ruby Sapphire breakup arc. I can't remember what the episode's called. I think it's brilliant.
Rebecca talks about it a lot, about like that moment when you realize your parents are just people. That like they go from being these incredible super beings that know everything, get everything right, and you in your head you go, well, when I'm a grown up, that's what I will be. Like there'll be one day I'll wake up. I'll be 21 or whatever, and I'll just be an adult, and I'll know everything, and I'll understand. I've just got to keep being a kid for a bit. And then there's a moment when the glass shatters on that illusion as a kid. And I think she's always talked about the test being that for Stephen, when he realizes they don't know what they're doing either. Like, they're struggling with these decisions too, and they're having to think about it, and they're trying to do their best, but they are fallible. They're human. And that's an important moment in this story, my interpretation of this story, because we've just had him find out that all this stuff, they never told him. So I think it's very important to immediately establish, because again, we don't want them actually fighting, because they're not, this isn't the Avengers, they're not going to start battling each other, and he's not going to be a whiny teenager. So it's important that he understands very quickly how this all transpired. So we know that he's not mad at them. He still loves and trusts them. He was frustrated in the moment, but with more information he understands. And I think the way you get him there is by adjusting that scene from the test. So that was, and there was a point when I toyed with putting the whole, the way we had a cheeseburger backpack, sort of a mini version of that built into the opening act. There was a moment when I tried to work in a full version of the test, but just once you're out of the first act, you're on the Lapis train to Crazy Town, so you can't really you can't leap off that train.
Yeah, but also you can't. You actually can't go to too many other worlds, and I like the fact that you've done another world, you've done the room, crazy room visuals, and you've done Beach City. I think pausing to go to that test environment, that's a very episode thing, not a movie thing.
I agreed. Yeah, 100% agreed. So anyway, they do go out onto the beach at the start of the third act. Mayor Dewey stood in the middle of what is now a desert, ship stranded. Maybe even we see Yellowtail with Onion. No, probably not speaking, because I don't know how in a movie you would separate that. I don't know what you do with that. So they don't say anything. They're just in the scene. But he stood in the middle. Everyone has come out. We very much established that how this is going to affect the boardwalk. Stephen turns to the gems to apologize. He knows this is his fault. He didn't bring the mirror to them when it showed signs of being sentient, and he knows he hasn't. And he says, and I know I haven't covered gem-possessed objects in class yet. I just thought I could do it anyway. Like, I love the idea that we harken back to the fact he's in gem lessons.
That's nice.
So he knows he's the one that freed Lapis, and that she's hurt his home now. So he's going to be the one to fix it, and he's going to find Lapis and bring the ocean back. The gems rally behind him. But they do realize that they don't actually know how far out into the desert, the newly formed desert, that she is. But Greg has the answer. Smash cut to all the gems comedically crammed into the back of Greg's untidy van. Garnet's so tall, her head's all bent over, like at the neck, like really awkwardly. Greg asks if everyone's comfortable. No response. He asks if they want music. He puts "Let Me Drive Your Van Into Your Heart" on the thing and says it was Rose's favourite. Garnet looks around at the other gems, and then we cut to the car moving through the desert. Now at night, several hours later, Garnet just on the roof, enjoying the peace and quiet. Just sat on the roof.
How does Greg know where she is then? Is he like, let's follow the
Well, in the show, they just drive out into the desert. They just go. They're just gonna go straight and see if they can figure it out. Like, I suppose, I guess in reality, you'd probably need. Maybe I could put up some MacGuffin about like a magnetic field being disturbed by the lack of the ocean, and they can follow the magnet. Like get a compass and it.
I'm sure. I just didn't know if you had an answer.
No, I mean, my best guess if I was just doing it on the spot would be that they notice all the compasses are pointing in the same direction, so they just go that way. Like, there's one built into the dash of Greg's car. And they're like, nice, and then Stephen has one on his phone, and they're all pointing the same way. So there's some sort of weird.
And I love it as well because it's you can set up the van earlier at the car wash scene with Greg.
Precisely. Brilliant. Yeah. That was intentional. I didn't physically write it down, but in my head that was there. So later, Stephen. So we cut to later on. Stephen's inside talking with Pearl, who is now driving with Stephen in the passenger seat. Amethyst and Greg are asleep on piles of Greg's stuff in the back, and obviously Garnet, we know, is on the roof. Stephen asks about the gems they fight and shows real concern, asking if there's anything at all they can do. And she explains that they were corrupted by Homeworld's last attack, and they haven't found a way to heal them yet. So the best thing they've decided to do for the time being is poof them and contain them until that time. She says that... she says they were going to tell Stephen everything eventually. It wasn't an issue of trust. And she nods, because... Stephen nods because he believes that's true. He asks about his mother and how she felt about starting the war. She explains that she didn't want it to come to that at all, because she just saw the beauty in Earth and tried to convince Homeworld to spare it, but they refused that, and action was her only option. I like the hint there, because you would just go, oh, she asked Homeworld, and they said no, because she was part of the Homeworld gems when she arrived. But in reality, we as viewers of the show know, of course, she asked not from a position of being a foot soldier, but from a position of being a diamond. But that's fans will understand that, and other people will just brush over that. So he says, that after they defeated Homeworld, the Crystal Gems decided to stay and protect the Earth from the corrupted gems that were left from Homeworld's attack, and they've done that for thousands of years, and they did that together for thousands of years until, of course, Greg came along, and then they exchange a little smile, look back at Greg just, upside down in the back of the van, arms spread. Stephen smiles, but as Garnet's voice suddenly reaches them, she says, "Up ahead." And Stephen, Pearl, and the compass thing will make this joke not really land as well. But Stephen and Pearl lean forward to look out the window and observes that at least they know where Lapis is now. Greg stirs from his sleep and leans forward as well, mouth agape, because over the horizon, the Tower of Water, disappearing into the clouds, can be seen. Swirls of clouds around it, lit by the moon. The visual is haunting but beautiful. Greg leans forward, utterly mesmerized, and utters, "Guys, I've just had quickly, the best."
Any temptation? Oh, sorry, I'll cut you off. Go on.
Greg leans forward and says, "Guys, I've just had the best idea for an album cover." Which is a direct line from the show. I can't take credit for that. It's very funny though.
That's awesome.
Yeah, go on. So what
sorry
you
about the
carry on.
Sorry about the ice during my talking and the interruption. Any negative, and then Greg came along. Any negative, upset glance from Pearl?
Ooh, that's a good question. That's the problem with the TV show is you get to go like, this week we're going to deal with this relationship and this problem, and this week we're going to deal with this one, and it's all compartmentalized and lovely and precise. When it's a movie, it's such a wider canvas, and you go like, well, but too many loose threads.
You can hint at it a little bit there, maybe.
Yeah, I think maybe that is a moment for maybe Stephen smiles, but Pearl maybe doesn't. Like there's a hesitation to Pearl. So when she says until Greg came along, Stephen perceives that as a. Oh, that's adorable. That's when I came along, but Pearl is seeing that as no until Greg came along. Like you could maybe play it.
Maybe Garnet says it, and Garnet says it, and Pearl looks down or something like that.
Yeah, 100%. So they reach the base of the water. They get out and approach. All the ocean life is actually floating inside this seemingly never-ending tower into the sky. They do that in the show, and I want to make sure we do that here so that nobody thinks that all the fishes are dead.
Yeah.
They came with the ocean. I mean, I've directly lifted that from the show, but it's a very important moment, I think.
And a great visual.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, yeah. I mean, that's a given. 100%. So they get out and approach, and Stephen steps forward, but Pearl tries to hold him back, but Stephen says, "No, you need to trust me. I can do this. I know her." Pearl takes a step back. Amethyst gives Stephen a nod, and Garnet, who wore a previously completely blank expression, suddenly breaks into a goofy smile and gives him a thumbs up. Like a really awkward thumbs up. He takes a deep breath before shouting, "Lapis Lazuli, I'm here to talk." And then the water shifts, and the shape of Lapis's face emerges in the surface. She asks what it is they want, and he says that things have changed since the war. He just wants to talk. She tells him to leave, but he reminds her that they're beach summer fun buddies. But she says, no, you're a crystal gem. Worse, the war criminal, rose quartz. And that's why she was poofed. It's why she was placed in the mirror. And he points out that they're all just gems, and they should be able to talk. She mocks him, says he doesn't know anything about his own history, so how can he possibly understand any of this? He says it isn't about the past, it's about the people of Beach City who are depending on him and the crystal gems to return the ocean, and that he's not going anywhere. Lapis replies, so be it, and her face disappears. Greg points out that that is quite ominous and immediately runs behind his van. I think he's seen enough movies to know that so be it is usually not a great line to hear come out of a villain's mouth. You've maybe seen a few too many Lonely Blade movies. So the water starts to shuffle, and out of its depths step 4 forms that shimmer and take shape, and eventually they become 4 versions of each of one of the crystal gems. Stephen points and yells, "That's unusual!" Because that's just a line from the show that I love so much. It's from Frybo, when these trousers are walking around of their own volition, and he just points at them and goes, "That's unusual." I couldn't not have that line in the.
Does she form water versions of the gems in the show?
Yeah, she does. Yeah, she does.
I can't remember.
And they have to fight. They have to fight themselves. So we have a bit of a battle here, but I'm gonna try and keep this. But the story stuff happens in the battle, so this is gonna be a little bit trickier for me to navigate without completely ballsing it up, so I might have to do a bit more reading here than the previous fight, so bear with me. A battle commences. Garnet tells the team to stick together, but they are separated almost immediately by these. They're very strong. Each they're all attacked by their own counterpart, who are seemingly invulnerable. Stephen's counterpart runs at him, fists raised and screaming. Stephen just panics and runs back towards Greg and the van. Garnet, so he's just being chased by a water version of himself comically, but Garnet punches one, but her fist gets stuck in its head. And then it punches her back, but it actually connects and she hits a rock wall nearby. Pearl's spear cuts through her counterpart and separates it into 2, but it just immediately reforms. I think these visuals are literally lifted from the show. Certainly the Garnet one. Amethyst uses her spin, but again gets sucked inside, so she uses her whip, and that just goes through it. Nothing's happening here. So Stephen is still being chased by his water counterpart, but he reaches the van where Greg is ready, and he says, "Leave my son alone!" And he swings his guitar, and it splits Water Stephen in half. But then it reforms straight away. Greg looks very panicked, because his triumph turns to dismay. He drops his guitar and backs away, but when the guitar lands, it rings out a single loud note, and the vibrations start to destabilize the Water Stephen, who stops on the spot, frozen. The vibrating of his particles are almost as if he's being shaken apart as the music hits him. The comprehension dawns on Stephen, and he gives his dad a quick kiss on the cheek and yells, "Thanks, Dad, you're a genius, I love you," as he runs towards where the other gems are fighting. He yells to Garnet and tells her that they're affected by sound, and she says, "Stephen, there's only one thing to do." He's a little lost by this statement. She breaks away from her counterpart with a series of backflips and sort of relaxes her stance and says, "Pearl, you ready?" Pearl, who is grappling with hers, pushes back. Amethyst gets hers as well. They both curt nods. Amethyst yells, "Born ready." And then Garnet's counterpart launches at her, but she holds up her finger to silence her, and she stops on the spot out of sheer confusion. And Garnet begins to sing, "If you're evil and you're on the rise, you can count on..." And then she looks at Stephen, "the 4 of us bringing you down." A widest smile erupts on Stephen's face as he runs back to the van. Amethyst jumps in, using her whip on her counterpart, singing, "'Cause we're good and evil never beats us." Pearl sighs, but joins in with a backflip and a dodge attack, swinging her spear, singing, "We'll win the fight and then go out for pizzas." And then a thunderous ukulele note plays, an F to be precise, as Stephen sings "We," and he plugged his ukulele into a large amp in Greg's van. All the gems launch attacks as they sing together, are the crystal gems. They sing the original 30-second version of the intro song from there, all as their water counterparts are destabilized. So they're winning now. These attacks are working. And each of them basically disintegrates their counterpart as they say their name. Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl. And Stephen puts down his ukulele. And Stephen! And they are hero posing again, all stood tall. And Avengers-esque.
Was Stephen part of the hero pose this time?
Yes, correct. Yeah. This is, of course, slightly undercut when Garnet immediately ruffles Stephen's hair, which is obviously the visual from the opening episode, I think, from the opening intro, from the very first intro. She ruffles his hair before they go up in the warp pad. There's a rumbling noise, and all 4 wet water copies of them suddenly reform. But then they merge together to create a larger version of Lapis, twice her normal height, completely out of water. Another fight breaks out. This doesn't seem like it's going to end. The gems team up to try and beat this double-sized Lapis, but it's not helping. They're losing very badly. Garnet asks Steven to retreat. He goes back to the van. Greg asks, is this a normal magical mission for you? Because I'm not sure how comfortable I am with you going on these anymore. Steven watches the gems. They each launch individual attacks that get thwarted. They're getting pummeled, absolutely pummeled. Steve tries the ukulele again. No luck destabilizing it. She's too large for that. Garnet instructs them to attack together, but Pearl and Amethyst keep getting in each other's way. This causes Steven, who moved forward to warn them of a sideswipe attack that was coming. He goes to warn them about this, but he ends up getting caught in the crossfire and knocked to the ground. Pearl turns to Amethyst. They both see Steven, and they're suddenly on the same page. For Steven, united by their desire to protect Steven. Amethyst throws Pearl one end of her whip. Pearl points out they haven't done a pendulum for years, but Amethyst points out it's now or never. Amethyst spins up her spin dash attack while holding one end of the whip. Pearl, holding the other end of the whip, starts swinging her round like a mace. Then she leaps at Lapis, spinning Amethyst, and then flings her, still holding the whip, but launches her at the giant Lapis's face. Sorry, it connects directly with her face, and then uses the momentum to fire Pearl right back at her again. Spear outstretched, she launches through Lapis's head, and as the head reforms, Amethyst pulls the whip back, and Pearl comes back the other way, destroying the head a second time. When the 2 gems come back together, based on the bunginess of the whip, they immediately fuse. Bright white light just kills the beach. No one can see what's happening. Steven covers his eyes to try and protect himself from it, and when he lowers his hands and the light starts to die down, the silhouetted figure of the tall woman in front of him, and he whispers in amazement, "Giant woman!" Opal raises the whip and spear, makes the bow, and in one awesome moment fires it at giant Lapis, and she explodes from the inside. Steven approaches her in awe and wonder. Doesn't know what to say, just gets out the words "hi." She giggles, and he asks, as with the show, and again, I'm sorry I borrowed so much dialogue from the show, do you know me?
I think that's fine.
I think these moments are fine for it. He says, do you know me? And she sings a few bars of Giant Woman, and his eyes light up. Then suddenly Lapis reforms, twice as big as last time, and Steven points and yells, "Mega Lapis!" But she attacks so quickly with a massive cannon of water that knocks everyone down. No one even gets a chance to regroup. Opal gets to her feet and sees Steven's bruised and tired, trying to get back to his feet, but he's wobbly. He can't even stand up. That attack really wiped him out. Opal yells Steven's name, and in a panic and worry, she just defuses, and Pearl and Amethyst hit the ground. But all 3 crystal gems rally in front of the struggling Steven, tired, catching their breath, but standing tall against Mega Lapis. Lapis says, "Look how they rally for you, Steven. Don't you see? You don't look like her, but you are Rose Quartz, dragging others into conflicts that will get them hurt to meet your needs." I might add a line there about meet the needs of Earth to really nail that one. But anyway, the water starts gathering for a single massive attack. Steven takes a single nervous step forward, looking at the gems, all focused on the fight ahead. Lapis adds, "Rose Quartz, the crystal gems, homeworld, you're all as bad as one another." The attack is building. Steven adds, "I might be a crystal gem, but I am not my mom." And as she fires the attack, he leaps through from between the crystal gems and yells, "I'm Steven!" As the blast impacts, a huge explosion of water, and as it settles, you see Steven standing there in all of his glory, the 3 gems behind unscathed, his mother's shield in hand, hero pose to hell, but it's reverberating from the hit. And that makes a noise that completely destables the giant Lapis, and she collapses. "This fighting stops now," Pearl utters. Pearl utters Rose's shield in amazement. "Lapis, I know you don't want to hurt anyone either." The face reappears in the water, looking anguished. "My mom had no choice but to fight for what she believed in, but we do. The crystal gems chose to come here to talk to you, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm coming up." Pearl says, "Steven, no," but Garnet holds out a hand and says they need to trust him. Steven nods, determined, and takes a deep breath and steps inside the water tower. He starts to rise up through it, and as he moves through the clouds, he looks up and he reaches the upper atmosphere. This is visuals is in the show, so you kind of know what we're looking at here for those who've seen that episode. Yeah. Obviously, he goes up through the tower, and when he reaches the top, Lapis is there, but she's not standing tall, waiting to have an argument. She's deflated. She's sitting on the edge, legs hanging over, head in hands. She didn't want this either. Steven says they should be friends, not enemies. This conversation plays out a little bit similar to the show. She isn't sure if she can trust the crystal gems, so they can't be friends. But now she's free. All she actually wants is to find a home, and that's actually the reason she took the ocean. She was just trying to get herself into space, but because she's broken, she's not healed. She can't fly into space. She's stuck, and she should have known this wouldn't have worked. Steven says he understands about needing a home because the Earth is his home, and she's hurt it by taking the ocean. But he does note that his mother could heal gems, and maybe he can help. He reaches out and touches her gem, concentrating. Suddenly, both gems glow. The crack seals itself, and she rises a foot off the ground. Her wings spread twice as long as the previous time we saw them. Her eyes shift from mirrors to normal pupils, and she pulls Steven into a big hug and thanks him for his help. He tells her Earth could be her home if she wanted, and that they could continue to be beach summer fun buddies. She smiles. She appreciates the offer, but doesn't think she'll ever see her former prison as her home. He understands, but asks. Oh, that's the same line twice. I don't know why that's in there a second time. Sorry. Steven wishes her luck finding a home, and she thanks him and basically flies off into the night. On the ground, the gems look apprehensive. Steven floats down through the water and steps out, smiling. I know I've rushed a little bit through this, but this stuff is so similar to the show that I was just like, I don't need to describe this in as much detail as the other bits. Yeah. The gems and Greg look on, proud. Pearl and Greg have a tear in their eye. Amethyst is punching the air. Garnet has a knowing smile. The water tower starts slowly leaking onto the floor like a leak. Like there's a little pool starting to form, and it's a tide almost. And Garnet says we should leave if we want to stay ahead of that. Sunrise the next morning is what you cut to, and Greg's car is pulling onto the beach. The gems and Steven hop out. Greg pulls out some binoculars from the back of his van, and he looks and says that the tide is in the distance and it'll be back at the beach within a few hours. He gives his son a hug. I'm proud of you, son, and your mum would be too. Steven and the gems go back to the temple. Steven says he knows he's young and that he can't know everything yet, and he will trust the gems moving forward to know when and what to tell him. He knows that when he's ready, they'll tell him what he needs to know. And until then, he just wants to be included, because he kind of admits that it wasn't really about being a crystal gem and going on awesome missions, although phrasing it that way makes it sound like it is a little bit. He just wanted to spend time with his mom's family because he gets to see bits of her through them every day. And once they part, Pearl and Garnet exchange a look. I don't know if I've added once they part. They're all together in the beach house. Let me remove that part. Pearl and Garnet exchange a look, and Pearl asks, Lappet made it off planet. What does that mean for us? Garnet looks thoughtfully out the window. I don't know. This makes Pearl look even more concerned, and Garnet adds, we'll have to wait and see. Steven mentions Opal and how amazing that was. Garnet congratulates him on helping his teammates work together. Amethyst points out that getting knocked on his butt doesn't count as helping. Garnet gives a knowing smile. Steven says he doesn't mind how it happened. He was just happy to meet Opal. Amethyst says it'll be awesome when Steven learns how to fuse, and he exclaims, wait, I can do that too? And then we get a shot of water reaching the beach. People having fun on the pier, swimming in the water. Maybe the cool kids are on a beach fire having a small rave. A line outside the Big Donut. Lars getting slapped by some random girl. The camera pans up, and Steven is watching all this play out from the hill from the start of the movie. It's the cliff that the temple is built into. He's on his own, a little bit of peace and quiet, and he looks up at the sky, thinking of Lapis. Credits. My magnum opus.
Well done. Very good. Is there an after credits scene?
There is.
Oh, nice. God.
You want to hear the after credits scene straight away? Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Obviously.
Oh no, where is it? Oh, it's in a separate document. Let me very quickly. Sorry, I didn't actually copy and paste it in. It's very short, Chris.
That's all right, no worries.
So you get the credits.
Oh, good.
But then there's it's a mid-credits one. A green hand at a control panel. Presses some buttons. You hear a voice. This is Peridot 458FE reporting from, I don't know, I wrote down a random bunch of numbers, but I was supposed to look up her actual designation. I didn't. I'm sorry. Reporting from Quadrant, JMV 605 or whatever. En route to Earth to gauge the progress of the cluster. I've encountered someone you may be interested in. She presses another button on the panel, and a monitor shows Lapis in a cage, sitting on the floor, head between her knees. Peridot turns, her face comes into view. Apparently, there are still a small number of gems left on Earth. I'm requesting permission to summon backup to investigate. Boom.
Nice. Nice.
So Lapis is basically immediately, unfortunately for her, bumped into Peridot, who was on her way to Earth to check for the cluster, or just to check on the cluster. And obviously, finding a gem out in space, you've got questions, and Lapis is giving the game away.
Yeah. That's awesome. Not for Lapis, poor thing, but...
Well, yeah. Her story ain't getting any better anytime soon, is it, really? All right.
No, that's awesome. Brilliant stuff.
So, sorry it was so long. It just kept getting longer. No. It just kept getting longer.
Not at all. I think there's, and it's a shame. You almost want like another episode to dissect that more. But I'm sure people in the comments will. We might do a part 3 of this and answer questions or whatever. But I think that was awesome. So what was in your head from the beginning? What of that was like, right, I want to include that. Like, I'm thinking of like Opal and stuff like that, or the decision not to reveal Garnet, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so the very, very first idea I had was up to Jailbreak. Because I was just like, you want to get to Garnet, right? Like, so the very first pass, the end of Act 2 wasn't the ocean being stolen. The end of Act 2 was Lapis flies off into space and is caught, and Peridot and Jasper are coming. But then I went, wait a minute, so the whole third act is 2 gems I've never met fighting the crystal gems. I don't have any connection to these people. And
don't knock it, Dan.
No, but here's the thing. In a TV show, that works because that's an introduction. Yeah. Then you will explore them, right? But in a movie, you're not going to care about your entire movie's end action sequence is 2 characters you've never met before. That just doesn't function in a movie. Plus, it then means you get less.
Dickhead, I'll do some redrafting. Jesus.
I think we've just learnt what Chris has included. No, but that was the way I sort of saw it, because then I thought about as well losing a lot of the time with, because what I really wanted to do was take the time to have Steven and Lapis on the beach having fun and like really establish Lapis as a character, so that in that final fight you're invested at least in Lapis and Steven and their interaction, because sadly, the way this story unfolds, the crystal gems really are incidental, tragically. Hopefully, you get to explore them further in the future. In fact, when I wrote down the things that were unfortunate about this movie, I wrote down 2 things. I wrote down Connie and the lack of, and then I wrote Lapis has more time with Steven than the gems. There's another criticism of the film that I would potentially level at it, because that isn't great.
Amazing. You didn't just put the movie together; you then critiqued it yourself.
Well, no, I was doing passes, wasn't I? So I was making notes as I went of things that I might try to fix in future. Next time I do a draft, I'll fix this. Next time I'll do a draft, I'll fix that. And as I fixed bits and bobs, the list of things I knew were broken got smaller and smaller. I've still not. I don't know if Act 3 is as strong as the others yet, but I think that's just because I'm worried it's too similar to the show. But that's a different issue. I think I've weaved enough of the stuff from the earlier in the movie into that to make it feel a little bit more unique. But yeah, I think the high point really is the end of Act 2, which is frustrating because you want the climax to be the high point. But I think the Opal stuff, and I think Steven coming through with the shield, that hopefully that stuff's going to be big moments for people. And singing the song while fighting the water versions themselves, that was kind of like, that was my sort of inclusion.
Yeah,
I was like, awesome. Really pleased with. But when I was thinking about it, I just kept worrying about like how invested you're going to be in all this stuff, and that's what the Dragon Ball movie did wrong. They just throw so much stuff at the wall just to get it all in. Get it in. You want to see Piccolo, you want to see the Dragon Balls, you want to see this, you want to see that, and then it's like, well, there's no story anymore because it's the film is collapsing under the weight of the stuff. You've put too much stuff in your movie, so I just kept stripping back and stripping back and stripping back, and the very first incarnation did include right up to Jailbreak and the Garnet reveal. But 2 things occurred to me. One is the thing I've just described about like it not really working as a story anymore because you're no longer invested in anyone. But then the other thing that hit me was Rebecca Sugar, like, she went, no, you'll find out about that like 50 episodes in. Like, I was rushing to Garnet, like, I'll blow everyone's mind. She's a fusion. But in reality, what is that actually like? What is that? Like, what if you're not invested, that's not going to mean anything to you, number one. So you're not blowing anyone's minds because you're only setting up fusion 10 minutes earlier. So I don't know, like there was a bunch of reasons I decided not to include it, and then it just made sense to me that Lapis confrontation was the most epic thing from the first half of season 1 to do. So yeah, I kind of made that choice pretty early, but it was like second draft that I trimmed it to that. Yeah. So yeah, but I mean,
what were the 2 scenes you tried to get in but couldn't?
So Stephen sat on a hill at night. This is, there was a point this would have fitted in the original. The scenes that led to this are gone now. So you're thinking, where would this even fit into the movie? It did at one point. But Stephen sat on the hill at night. He sighs. I know I can't know everything, but my mum gave herself up to make me. All I want to know is why. This is right towards the end of the movie, by the way. This is like post Lapis. This is like an ending tag almost. I know I can't know everything, but my mum gave herself up to make me, and all I want to know is why. His gem glows for a second. There's a rustle in the leaves. He looks round. It's too dark to see, but there is now a clear shape at the top of the hill. He gets out his phone and turns on the torch. He points it at the shape for a second, but he drops his phone. But as the phone falls, it briefly lights, and you see a big wave of pink hair. He fumbles for the phone, and he says, "Mom," but then he hears footsteps and purring, and the shape moves closer, and two glowing eyes flash in front of him. He finally gets to his phone and casts his line and reveals Lion in its insane pink glory. He yells and falls back. Lion looks at him, and he says, "You're pink. You're not here to hurt me, are you?" And then Lion steps forward and nuzzles him. He reaches out to stroke his fur, but eventually his whole arm seems to go inside. His eyes widen, and then he pulls out a videotape.
Nice. Lion is the Lion and Connie is Lion's the other big thing we've not. Yes. We had Peridot, we had Lapis. You kind of explained why Jasper's not there. I was going to ask about Lion, so it's cool that was like an alternative bonus scene sort of thing.
Yeah, so the Lion, I think that's the way to do it, to introduce Lion, to have him show up and give Stephen the tape. But the problem was the themes of this movie. Stephen wasn't really. So there was too much going on because he was asking all these questions about war criminals and stuff. But I also had him then going, "But why did she make me?" And so the early drafts of this, he had two conflicts because he also didn't understand why he existed, and that was too much. It was not focused, and it was all over the place. So in half the scenes, he's moaning about the fact he doesn't understand why she gave up her form for him, and in half the scenes, he was going on about whether she's a war criminal or not, and it was very messy. The Lion thing doesn't fit into. Because the idea was that both those stories were going to happen simultaneously, and we were going to end with the tape and actually end on him watching the tape, because that gives us closure on that too. But I thought, no, that's a plot for a whole movie. That's Stephen's conflict for the sequel. That he's worried about why did she make him, and then he bumped So that is still how I think I might introduce. I would if I was writing this if I was doing if I was doing a sequel. That's how he would maybe meet Lion. Not exactly maybe those exact description, but Lion would sort of approach him after he asks the question of, "I want to know." The same way the room responded to his gem, Lion would appear. I like that idea better than them just finding Lion. I like the idea of Lion finding Stephen a bit more, especially when he's directly asked a question. Because there's no need to dick about in a movie with Lion's intention. The idea is, you meet Lion, you have no idea he's connected to Rose Quartz, and he shows up a bunch of times, and there's no immediate. Then there's an episode where he pulls the sword out of its head, and you go, "Oh, there's more to this Lion than I previously knew." But in a movie, you don't want that's chuffer. That's perfect for a TV show because it allows you to extend the story, but you immediately want to go, "What's with this fucking Lion?" Right? So so that's how you would do it.
That would still work in this as a bonus. It's not as good as the after credit scene you've got, but it still would fit that purpose as well if you wanted to do that.
I suppose, but then you've got a whole movie of him not watching a tape he's just received because you really want to make that the closure to a very a story of him being conflicted about his origins.
I suppose in that you edit it so that it's less about that question. You still have Lion appear instead of him pulling out a tape. He falls into the main.
Yeah.
And then you end the movie on him falling into a line.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
What was the other one?
The other one was just a bit of a dialogue that was again part of a version of the script where there were scenes where he was questioning his origins, and it's back in the scene where he's in the car with Pearl, in the van with Pearl, and he says, "Did she know having me would mean she'd give up her form?" Pearl hesitates but says yes, and Stephen goes, "Why would she do that?" And Pearl responds, "Honestly, Stephen, I don't know why. But I do know it's what she wanted." And he goes, "How could you know that?" And she says, "Because she always did exactly what she wanted." And I think nice. I like that because it harks to Mr. Greg a bit, because obviously there's a line from the song where she always did what she wanted. But I also think it's I love the certainty and the hint that Pearl knows Rose maybe a little better than the other gems.
Yeah, that's nice.
So
great, man.
Great
stuff.
But again, it was part of a sequence of. It just muddied Stephen's conflict. It kept muddying it. I kept putting it in because I like that idea, but it didn't belong in this movie. This was a movie about him questioning her, the war and the gems not telling him stuff, and him finding out that they've been fighting other gems all along. One thing I would, if I rewrote it, think of doing is maybe having a scene at the end where he goes down to the burning room and maybe talks to the gems and says, "I'm gonna get you out of here one day. I'm gonna sort this out." I think because I think there's so much of this movie is about. There's no closure to that because so much of the film is about the fact that this is horrible, that these poor things they've been fighting them and they're actually gems or whatever. It strikes me, especially reading it now, that it's missing that kind of closure.
Yeah, do you think that comes across because in a way they fight one corrupted gem, and then that sort of goes away until that scene in the room with Lapis, where it kind of is more about Lapis's horrified reaction to it than why they've done it?
There's two, isn't there? There's the one in they fight one in the Sea Spire, don't they? Have I taken that out? At one point,
that's true.
At one point,
you're right.
At one point, they have a little battle on the Sea Spire. So I tried to make sure there was at least two. I tried to make sure there was more than one.
No, that's fair.
Just because you're right. That was a concern for me as well. I was like, no, we've got to establish they do this all the time. So so I made, even though that in the original Cheeseburger Backpack they don't fight a monster, it's not about that. I threw one in the Sea Spire for them to fight because it gave me the chance to set up Amethyst and Pearl not fighting in sync. But it also gave me the chance to do another monster, so we can say, well, they've done two, so this is daily in and out for them. This is what they're doing on a daily basis, and then you reaffirm that when he goes into the burning room and you see how many they've trapped.
So why was fusion something to definitely include?
Because you don't want to explain it in the same movie you introduce Garnet.
Yeah. Yeah. That's absolutely.
I just think it's too convenient, isn't it? You introduce a concept and then pull a twist with it. It's like, no, you introduce the concept, lull people into a false security, and then you drop that bomb. Because half the people watching this, if this was to exist, would already know and would be like, yeah, come on. But then the idea of this, and one of my rules I set out was to be inclusive, and not just give that away because who wouldn't know. You want to make sure that you're giving people who are watching this and this is their first experience of Steven Universe, the Steven Universe experience, and that one of the great rites of passage to a Steven Universe fan is having that moment, and rushing to it would ruin it. It really would. Rebecca Sugar knows what she's doing. You got to get a movie space. So a theoretical sequel would be them would be Peridot. Because the problem you've got now is that in reality what happened was Peridot and Jasper landed and they had the fight, but I like the idea that Peridot and Jasper would arrive, the Crystal Gems would know they were there, but they wouldn't immediately have the big fight that we get in there. There'd be sequences, you'd get to know them basically through Steven's eyes. Maybe they capture Steven earlier in the movie and you get a lot more stuff on the ship. I've not really thought it through, but you could definitely deal with if you've already established fusion, you could really do something the show couldn't do, which is really sell it and have Steven meet Sapphire and Ruby. Because in the show, you see Garnet separated first, then you meet Sapphire and Ruby, and it's like, oh, I get it. Whereas here, I like the idea that that Garnet fought Jasper and lost, but Steven didn't see exactly what happened, so you as the audience don't. Then he's on this ship with Lapis and these other trapped gems, and you just think there are other trapped gems. You really sell the twist in a way that you couldn't sell it in the show because the show needed to move.
Yeah,
it's 11 minutes.
It's such a shame because you're absolutely right. But not for the one that got bleeped earlier, but my alternative casting for Ruby and Sapphire means that I really want to shoehorn them in. But you're right for all the reasons not to do it.
Well, look. Here's the thing. Maybe that's the challenge. Find a way to make that work. I landed on not doing it, but there might be a way to do it. Maybe skip the Lapis stuff, go straight to Homeworld Gems are coming. I don't know. There's probably ways to do it.
There's one way I can think of that definitely helps, which I've got in mind, so I won't say any more on. But
yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to go over. Oh yeah, just so people know, the inspirations for this were literally Cheeseburger Backpack, Giant Woman, Mirror Gem, Ocean Gem, The Test, Rose's Room, Storm in the Room, and Your Mother of Mine. Those are the episodes.
And I think that's a question I had. Is it a very deliberate choice to have him? Because I thought it was really interesting to have him say, "I'm not my mother," and then recreate the visual that we saw Rose do earlier in the movie.
Yes.
Was that how much thought went? Was that deliberate? Was that what talk about that a bit?
Well, there's two things happening at once. There's an element of he's always going to protect the gems, so there's an echo of his mother, because that's what she was trying to do at the end of the day, was protect the gems. But the difference is she was protecting them after there being a war, and he's pulled out the shield here ahead of anyone getting seriously hurt and saying, I'm not my mother, I'm Stephen, let's talk. Because my mum didn't have the option to do that. She tried that, it didn't work. I'm here to do that. And for him, the shield comes out in that moment to give, in this version of the story, it comes out to give him that opportunity. But yeah, you could argue there's a contradiction there, but I think you just about get away with it because it's clear that there are major similarities between Stephen and Rose, and by doing something she did, it doesn't make him her. It doesn't prove Lapis right, because it's not always about what he says, about your actions. And what he does after that is he goes to talk to Lapis to solve this with words. There's two versions of that though. So the one that I read out was, I might be a crystal gem, but I'm not my mom. And he runs forward, I'm Stephen. And then the one I've got next to it as an alternative, which I actually am very tempted to switch to, is I'm not my mom. My name is Stephen. And I'm a crystal gem, as he leaps forward with the shield, because the premise of the movie was that he didn't feel like a crystal gem, so I thought that really capped it off well. But then I thought, I don't know which one I like better. I think both have interesting things to say.
Yeah, I think I'd have gone with the one you went with. I mean, we have all four sing a song called "We Are the Crystal Gems." So I think you cover that.
That's fair. Yeah, you've got.
No, I don't mean that in a like. I'm not being facetious.
No, you're right. No, you're 100% right. Yeah, you're absolutely. You've literally nailed it. I had some problems with the mirror, to be honest with you, because.
Yeah, I can't remember, where does the mirror actually appear in the show?
Pearl has it.
Right, yeah.
Pearl gives it to him, which is great, because then when she's saying, this is where I had conflict, because so in the show, Stephen wants to learn. She's like, well, if you want to learn about gem culture, here's a mirror that can tell you about it, and he runs off with it. She gives it to him, not realizing it's not working, and then he finds out it's Lapis, right? But that gives us this great moment of, you had me all this time, and you didn't even think to ask who I used to be. That's a great moment. It's a powerful moment. It gives Lapis a lot of reason to hate the gems, and you understand it. I didn't want to lose that. But I also thought that was a really lame way for Stephen to get the mirror in a movie. It works in the show because you just want to get moving, right? You've got 11 minutes to tell the story. Give him the fucking mirror. I don't just give it to him. I don't care if he just trips over it on the beach. Literally give him the mirror and let's move on. But in a movie, you want it to sort of all feel fluid, right? You want it to feel like he did this, which led to this, which led to this. So his earlier concerns, because you want it to feel causal. You want it to feel like cause and effect. So he's got these anxieties. He says them out loud. Pearl hears them. She feels the best way to give that is to bring him on a mission. One that she feels would be nice and straightforward. It doesn't go right, which makes him extra determined to prove himself. And in that moment, he finds the mirror in the rubble of the Sea Spire, cracked by him, which adds an extra element to his relationship with Lapis, I think. The idea that he actually cracked her. Because in the show, she was just already cracked. She's already broken. The problem I had was, I had that, and then it was like, well, then Pearl didn't own her, or own it, sorry, for all that time, which takes an element out of their relationship. So I had two different versions. One where he finds it at the Sea Spire almost as is, and one where they come back. He finds the Moon Goddess statue on his bed where he accidentally left it, and he asks Pearl, like deflated, "What am I going to do with it?" And she goes, "Oh, we have a trunk for all the old gem artifacts that don't work anymore." And he finds the mirror in there, and he's like, "Can I fix this?" Like it was a bit contrived. It didn't really work. So the solution I came up with was having Pearl establish this used to be our base, and then when he gets the mirror, she goes, "Oh, I remember that mirror. We used that mirror. It used to have gem knowledge, and it's broke. Now it's broke." Like, do it that way.
Yeah, I think if you wanted to, you could push it further where, like, it didn't used to be their base. It's somewhere that they've had lots of battles and leave their crap, and you almost have one of them talk to the, like, "Hey, mirror," and the mirror like gives an answer or something, and it's like, sure. she's not even valuable enough. There's two elements to it. She's not even valuable enough for them to take home. Like, she's their fucking, like, the mailman that they say hi to when they're here. But two, if you set that area up like that, then it makes even more sense that they've chosen that area for a mission for Stephen, because it's one they know, and like, it's not really a proper mission because it's, it's almost at home. Maybe.
Yeah, I like the idea that they maybe just brought it and discarded it, but I don't think you could have the high mirror moment just specifically. The rest of that works perfectly, I think, but the high mirror moment is problematic because the idea is that they were too wrapped up in their own shit to notice she was in there, not that they knew someone was in there because it was talking to them. Because I think the idea is that when Pearl hands it to Steven in the show, she says you just ask it questions and it will show you stuff from Gem history. She doesn't think it's sentient, and like when it starts talking back to Steven, she's like, "This is very wrong. This is a problem." In the movie, the problem with that is the reason that moment isn't in this script is because that moment immediately is a call to action for the story. So the minute Pearl goes, "What's that? Why is it talking?" Your story then has to barrel towards him freeing Lapis, them fighting on the beach, when I wanted the quieter moments of Steven and Lapis bonding. So I had to get the gems out of the picture when it started talking to him instead, which I think works fine in the film, but wouldn't have probably worked in the show because it would have been too long. But yeah, I think the mirror thing, having them talk to it, would show that they had a certain sense of its corporeal, like it's that's too much. They know it talks, and then that raises questions of if they're talking to it, did they never go, how is it talking? Is it a gem? Like there's a you're maybe too much on Lapis's side at that point.
Maybe instead of having them go back on a random mission, because I see what you're saying. You're trying to, I get the feeling maybe another thing you'd potentially tweak is like, oh, we're going on another mission. Is how disheartening is it that they're holding the statue, like, and as they go, he realizes that they're going on the mission they took him on, and they're going to do it properly, like, and that. Imagine how that makes him feel.
It's a really strong idea. Although I don't know how you'd resurrect the Sea Spire with this. Yeah, but I suppose it wouldn't matter. Magical gem stuff, it doesn't even matter, does it? Really, it's just MacGuffin at the end of the day. Yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's just a thought.
I think that's a really strong idea. Because
then that explains why they're back so quickly as well.
Right.
Because they fundamentally come back
in the show. Yeah, they do. They say it might take a couple of days, but they end up coming back much sooner. And I get the impression that the implication is that off screen they got home, found Steven gone, the door wide open. There's a storm. They can see footsteps down the beach. They're like, "What the fuck is happening?" And they run off. To try and save him. They think my presumption was always that the minute they see him with Lapis, they think she's kidnapped him because she's a homeworld gem from their perspective.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think there's an interesting thing with from the original show with my brain just absolutely died in my head. What was the last point you were talking about?
Them going back, the idea that they're not going on a random mission, they're going back to do that mission properly.
Oh, there's another thought that span off for that, but I've forgotten it. Not to worry, it can't have been important. I wouldn't have forgotten it.
I really think you should be very proud of yourself. I thought that was a fantastically well put together version. I think that's a brilliant answer and way more detailed and nuanced than I'm sure going to do. So well done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm terrible at taking compliments, but I will say thank you.
No, I thought you've done a brilliant job, and you've absolutely shown your writing capabilities.
Well, I think for me it was like just an experiment, because how often do you get to do an adaptation as a writer, as an amateur writer, someone who's trying to write stuff for themselves, like. You always work on your own ideas. How often do you get to actually adapt someone else's idea? And that's a skill in itself. Adaptation is a whole line of work you could get yourself into if you were writing. And there's ways to do it and there's ways to not do it. And I think practicing and I might do an episode of my I used to talk about, which I need to revive very quickly because that died on its ass pretty quickly. But maybe talk about the process for this and how valuable it was to actually just sit down for a minute and look at a story that already exists and think about adapting it to another format and actually thinking not just about I want to see this and I want to see this and I want to see this. Like, you're not playing with a toy box. You've really got to think about the format it's transferring to and what works in that format and understanding.
I mean, at present, I'm absolutely playing with a toy box next week. So
do it. That's the other side of the coin for me. Like that wasn't what was interesting about this question. I taught again. It's the writer producer. It's like there's two different angles of the same coin, and there's no right or wrong answers here. It's just like let's do something fun. Like let's do something that challenges us. And what what I was interested in was the challenge of, can you make the Steven Universe story fit into a roughly 2-hour film? And I 8,500 words later and 22 pages, I think I figured it out.
I think you definitely can. I think you've done it's also there's so many nods, like when you'd go, it was partly inspired by, and you list those episodes, like that's more than enough, I think, to make the fan go, yeah, like awesome.
I was when I sat down and actually worked out what episodes I'd managed to include, and I must admit, I was like, wait, did I fit all that in? Like the test is in there through one scene. Mirror Gem Ocean Gem are obviously the biggest inspiration for it. Giant Woman sort of is a B plot throughout. Cheeseburger Backpack is a whole section at the front of the movie. The Roses Room and Storm in the Room are obviously through the room scene. Your Mother and Mine is when he gets the little glimpse into a version of what may have happened in the past. You know, I was surprised when I actually sat down and like, because I watched all those episodes as I was writing this, for not for inspiration, but like I was like trying to make sure I understood exactly what it was the characters were saying and doing in those stories, and there were a couple of episodes I watched that I wanted to include because I thought I could include, and when I watched them I was like, no, you don't have a place in my story. I didn't write those ones down, but I watched about 20 episodes of the show trying to figure out what to pick and choose from. And those were the sort of like, what is that, 8 or 9 that I came to like borrowing either ideas or the whole premise of, which is Mirror Gem Ocean Gem, or just even scenes like the test where I've just got that one moment because it's so important and it actually fits quite nicely into it. But there were, you know, it was a bit like assembling Frankenstein's monster. It's like, I'll take this from you, and I'll take this from you, and I'll take this from you. And then there was a bunch of stuff I put in that I was like, no, because I obviously initially there was all that jailbreak stuff. And I was like, no, I've got to take you back out. You don't fit. You're
taking dialogue and moments though. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's not Frankenstein's monster because it's just, you're taking themes. You're not trying to do 6 episodes in a movie.
Sure, yeah. And I think what's important as well is that like it wasn't random. I chose the ones I knew could fit together to tell a singular story, because that's what I'm proudest of this is it's a story about a boy who wants desperately to be a crystal gem, and he's not trusted enough yet, and it's about him being mature enough to realize that that's because he's young, and learning that lesson, and then learning about pacifism as well, and learning that he doesn't want to go the way of his mother. Like there's a pretty clear story arc for Steven that's, considering I've borrowed from a show that every episode is about something different and someone else has a different kind of feeling and emotion Steven might be having. They're all about different things. Like the fact that I was able to find a clear through line across 9 episodes of the show that I was able to smush together. I was really pleased at the and again, what it comes down to is me spending a lot of time making notes, thinking, like, on the train to work, just like desperately typing out, well, if this fits in here, this doesn't fit in it. And then the other day, one of the final things I did before the final pass was that I took Dan Harmons Story Circle and applied it to that, and it fit not perfectly, but pretty damn close. And if anyone doesn't know about Dan Harmons Story Circle and you're interested in writing, there are a few videos online about it. There's one where they use the Dark Knight to illustrate it. It's a really good video, and it's basically, it explains what each step of the video is, and then explains how the Dark Knight hits it. It's basically what Dan Harmon did was he read a bunch of old books about story structure, and basically smushed a bunch of really great, some very old and clever, and some more recent, all these incredible storytelling techniques together, and he created this premise called the Story Circle, which is like a way to structure anything, really. And it's good. It's really good.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. So fantastic work. Any questions about it below? We'll see if we get enough to do more. I think I feel there's way more to dissect, but that's awesome. Yeah,
anyone has any questions about about what choices that were made or anything like that, stick them down below. Maybe we'll do an episode. I mean, to be fair, we've only got a couple of weeks till the movie, so maybe we'll have to see how that works timing wise. But we'll certainly at some point have a look at tackling some of those questions in an episode in future, if anyone has any.
I think a bit of because we might do mine and then potentially questions if we get enough. A bit of business. I believe the last episode ended on me not being sure what to eat. Scrambled egg is what I went for in the end.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, you went with your heart. You went with your heart.
Yeah, and I believe I sent you a picture. So
you did.
Free to chuck that up on
I'll put that up if I remember to edit it in. Absolutely.
Yeah. There we go. Well, you'd be pleased to know, people, it's 9:15, so Nadia's definitely eaten by now, we assume.
Yes, correct. That was my instructions.
I don't know. I don't know if Jess is eating without me or not, because I know we're having beef fajitas like in lettuce, so I don't know. That doesn't seem that is a dish you could cut in half and cook separately, or I don't know.
I don't think so. No, not unless you were going to mess up a lot extra pans.
Maybe. So she might be very hungry. So I'm gonna head off and eat.
I am so desperate for the toilet for the last 10 minutes. So I just
huge congratulations to Dan. I think that was brilliant, and I look forward to disappointing you all next week with my ramshackle toy box approach.
Not. No. I'm sure it'll be a bunch of fun. I think I took it too seriously, and I think that it'll be a very nice.
I won't take it seriously enough.
No, I think maybe we just put our ideas together and we get something more palatable. I think it'll be a welcome change after me taking it too seriously. Have some fun with it and just see what sort of, when you're not as shackled down by rules and story structure, if you can just come up with something that's really fun. Like, I just think that's the idea, right? Like, I think that's great. And I don't, and there's room for a great story in a fun, like, sort of a lighter version of it anyway. I actually, that's one question I had for you, Chris, because my biggest challenge I felt was making sure it still felt accessible to kids and funny and silly in places. Do you think I did enough stuff for that? I was worried about that.
I think so.
I think when I was writing the beach scene, I was worried about that.
No, I think the humour and also the lessons of it are very clear, and that's what you want in that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, cool.
Right.
Thanks very much for listening.
See you next week. Thank you very, very much. Yeah.
I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
I'll speak to you next week for another edition of Stephen University.